Chapter 1042. Baligaju walked over. He paused for a moment before he reached out and pressed the button on the table lamp. Although the lights were off, the room wasn't completely dark. The floor-to-ceiling windows gave the moonlight a good channel to pour in, making it look like mercury sprinkling in from outside the room. It was very beautiful. Hellion Vivian's heart was a little different from before. When a certain highness lay down later, she wanted to hug him properly, especially rubbing his ears. Otherwise, she didn't know why she always felt a little uneasy. Time passed little by little. Hellion Vivian could even hear the sound of him taking off his coat. But what she didn't expect was that he didn't lie down this time. Instead, after helping her turn off the lights, he walked out of the bedroom indifferently. It seemed that he wanted to sleep somewhere else. Hellion Vivian's eyes suddenly shook. She didn't expect this at all. Her fingers that were outside also froze. He didn't lie down. Wei Wei's long, shapely eyebrows creased. Although two people spent a long time together, there would be a period of not-so-sweet between them. In order to maintain each other's personal space, it was not a big deal to sleep separately. But she was already used to sleeping beside him every day. Without that person's embrace, she always felt that something was missing. And it was too sudden. It was so sudden that she didn't know what to do. After all, a few days ago he happily lifted her up very high. So it really had something to do with her growth? Hellion Vivian moved left and right, but still couldn't fall asleep. She simply lifted the blanket and sent Qingshan a WeChat message. If the person you love wants to sleep in a different bed from you, what will you do? At that time, Qingshan was cultivating with her brother in the demon world. Bailey Shangxia's face was still expressionless. He held his brother with his left hand. He was dressed in a black little demon costume, and there was a pair of demonized wings behind him. Black feathers would fall to the ground as he walked. Around his neck hung a skeleton necklace made of black pearls. His snow-white skin and exquisite facial features always gave people a kind of beautiful to the point of evil. Basically, as soon as he appeared, the demons that were originally running amok in the demon world would have to hide in their caves, trembling, not daring to show their faces. However, the monsters found it strange. The little devil had always fought alone. Why did he bring a human this time? More importantly, they had never seen the little devil so gentle to anyone before. That cautiousness, as if he was afraid that the other party would fall, really blinded them. Moreover, he even smiled just now. He seemed to be in a good mood today. In a good mood? The monsters looked at each other and rubbed their cheeks vigorously. They didn't see wrongly. The little devil was indeed in a good mood. It was as if red rain was about to fall from the sky. One had to know that every time the little devil appeared in the demon world, it would come with resentment. Its destructive power was extraordinary. Any monster that wanted to run to the human world would usually be treated as a punching bag by him. Today he actually didn't make a move. This was really too unusual. Bailey Shangxia didn't care about the buzzing monsters around him. He was indeed very happy. Along the way he only dealt with 2 or 3 overly fierce snake monsters. He didn't do much. After all, he had to look after his little brother. Little Qingshan sat at the side and watched Bailey Shangxia kill monsters. Every time he saw such a huge monster appear, he wanted to help. However, his big brother was afraid that his clothes would be stained with blood, so he only allowed him to watch from afar. He didn't allow him to come close. Little Qingshan was obedient. He opened his big round eyes and waited for Bailey Shangxia. Every time Bailey Shangxia killed a monster, he would run over with his short legs and give Bailey Shangxia milk to drink. The two little ones had a good relationship. Although it was said that they were cultivating in the demon world, in reality, it was just a trip to another place. What do you like? Big brother will catch it for you to play with. Bailey Shangxia turned his head and said to Qingshan, "What do you like? Big brother will catch it for you to play with." Qingshan didn't really want anything. The pearls that his big brother gave him last time were still there, as well as some jewelry. Every one of them was new. However, it was his first time in the demon world, so he still felt that it was strange. The little one stood there and looked left and right. As if he had discovered something, he suddenly ran 2 steps forward and grabbed a furry tail, wanting to pull it. Bailey Shangxia followed behind him. He wanted to wait until his little brother couldn't pull it out before he helped. Who knew that the monster thought that the little devil was gone, so it arched its body and wanted to eat someone. Bailey Shangxia's eyes suddenly narrowed. He grabbed the tail with his right hand, then pulled it up and kicked it hard. There was a bang. The monster flew more than 20 meters to the east and instantly turned into a puddle of disgusting black water. Qingshan knew that in the demon world, such man-eating monsters would often come to the human world to cause trouble. The monster just now must have been looking for a crack to the human world. Fortunately, his big brother stopped it. Otherwise, many people in the human world would have died for no reason. Bailey Shangxia frowned. Without waiting for Qingshan to speak, he held his little brother's hand and lowered his head to blow on it. Obviously, he was worried that the monster just now would hurt Qingshan. My phone rang. Qingshan tilted her head and took out her little phone from Bailey Shangxia's pocket. Bailey Shangxia leaned over to take a look. With a cool face he asked, "Who is it?" "It's Beauty Wei Wei." Qingshan looked at the profile picture and then at the WeChat message. She was very confused. "This is?" Bailey Shangxia seemed to be experienced. "You're getting a divorce." Qingshan is just sleeping separately. "Why are they getting a divorce?" "Yes, in the future when the judge asks me who I want to be with, I will say I want to be with mother." Bailey Shangxia immediately expressed. Qingshan, it's not getting a divorce. Why did his big brother already think of that? "Don't worry, mother and father's divorce won't affect us at all. I will take care of you." Bailey Shangxia reached out and patted the little one's head. Little Qingshan heaved a long sigh of helplessness as he rested his forehead on his hand. Why did he feel that his elder brother was looking forward to the divorce? But how to solve the problem of sleeping separately? He didn't seem to know either. "Let's go out for a drink? Have a heart-to-heart talk." Qingshan lowered her head and typed on her phone seriously like a little adult. Hellion Vivian looked at the reply on the screen. It was fine to go out on a date, but it was not bad to have a drink. Didn't they say that one would speak the truth after drinking? She could ask him what exactly was on his mind. Did he really only want to take care of her? Otherwise, why did he walk away just now? Or was he tired of her? Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows. No matter what, she had to talk about it. Chapter 1043. The moonlight in the study was obviously cooler than the one in the bedroom. Baligaju was lying on the sofa with his long legs slightly crossed. He looked at the ceiling with his deep eyes and tugged at his tie with his left hand. Although he was still in his adorable state, his expression was more chilling than ever. The demons didn't dare to approach such a king. They didn't know what was going on. But they were sure that it had something to do with the princess. No one knew what Baligaju was thinking. He raised his arm and covered his forehead. His posture was lazy and handsome, but it was deadly dangerous. No, it was more accurate to say that it was cold than dangerous. His whole body was exuding a strong demonic aura. This was a state that only appeared when he was unhappy. Although no matter how much two people liked each other, there would be space between each other. Even if he knew this kind of thing, he also wanted to monopolize her. Let that person's whole body, including her soul and thoughts, belong to him at all times. Baligaju opened his eyes. There was a faint light in his eyes. Should it be said that she cared about too many things? It seemed that no matter what, she couldn't put only him in her heart. Baligaju was thinking when he turned around and saw her at the door of the study. "Do you want to drink some wine?" Hellion Vivian raised the 2 bottles of dry red wine in her hand. She sat down cross-legged and began to open the wine. Baligaju reached out and took the wine opener. He lowered his eyes and smiled. "How can I let Master do this kind of thing?" To be honest, Hellion Vivian faced such an innocent face. It was really difficult for her to be ruthless and get a certain highness drunk. But thinking about it carefully, a certain highness was drunk so she could trick him, rub his ears and hug him to sleep. Hellion Vivian didn't care about anything else. She picked up the wine glass and clinked it with Baligaju. Both of them were wine experts, so the red wine they drank was naturally not bad. But Hellion Vivian thought that she would drink a certain highness and then put her hands on him. Who would have thought that in the end the one who got drunk was her? When she woke up the next day, her head was extremely heavy. Hellion Vivian glanced at the kasaya she was wearing. Other than the fact that it was a little messy, it was still on her. Perhaps she was being too narrow-minded. But why didn't anything happen last night? In the past, even when she had just woken up, he would hold her down and not let her get up. Is the enthusiasm fading now? Could it be that he had really reached the stage of boredom? Hellion Vivian shook her aching head again. "Come here, drink some hangover soup." Baligaju frowned as he looked at her. She must have just taken a shower, as her whole body was filled with the fragrance of the shower. Hellion Vivian held the bowl and drank the soup. Then she began to do nothing. Something had indeed changed. He didn't kiss her. In the past, whenever she finished drinking anything he brought over, he would pinch her chin and lower his head to kiss her, no matter what the occasion was. But these 2 times he did not kiss her. Hellion Vivian couldn't figure it out and started to brush her teeth with a toothbrush. Was it because she had grown up and made him lose the pleasure of raising her? If that was the case, he would have just said it. Why did he have to be like this? Hellion Vivian spat out the mouthwash and frowned at herself in the mirror. She decided to get a certain highness drunk again tonight. Since it was inconvenient to go out at night, she would put a sign on Taobao that she was not open for business temporarily. That way she wouldn't ruin her reputation if she didn't accept the orders. Hellion Vivian opened her laptop, entered her account number and password, and quickly entered the background of the online shop. The rules of her Taobao shop were very clear. She only did business during the day and only did business at night. It was not easy to confuse. All this time no one would ask about ghosts during the day. Unexpectedly, Hellion Vivian received a message as soon as she logged in. Shop owner, I want to ask you to help me. We seem to have met a ghost, but we also don't seem to have met one. But it's too scary. Someone has died around us. The police said it was an accident, but this accident came too coincidentally. There must be something going on. Shop owner, help us investigate. The person who left the message was a girl. From the looks of it, it was very serious. After all, it was very difficult for an ordinary evil ghost to take a person's life. At most, it would make people feel depressed and scare people. Moreover, evil ghosts had to use a medium to kill people. They would not suddenly kill people. After a person was followed by an evil ghost, the first thing they should do was to dream. They would not die just like that. Hellion Vivian intuitively felt that this matter was not simple. She typed word by word, I want to know the meeting address, contact number, the guest's name, and the location of the incident. Shop owner, I finally waited for you. The person on the other side of the computer seemed to have grabbed onto a life-saving straw as he typed quickly. They all said that you would only appear at night. We've been waiting for you since yesterday. We've been waiting for you for an entire night. We thought there was no hope. Hellion Vivian replied, I originally planned to rest for 3 days, but it seems that I can't do that now. The breeding of evil spirits could easily create a gap between the human world and the demon world. He had to see what was going on. After all, a ghost stained with blood would kill a second person after the first time. Leaving such a ghost in the human world would definitely become a disaster. Hellion Vivian had dealt with many such cases before. Because in this world there were many cases of people dying inexplicably. The media would tell people that the other party was an inhumane serial killer. In fact, half of those serial killers were indeed human. The other half were malicious ghosts who took pleasure in killing people. Such malicious ghosts must be eliminated. Hellion Vivian looked at the glowing prayer beads on her wrist. If she did it again, she should be completely grown up. What would His Highness's attitude be then? Would he think that she was not as interesting as when she was young? Hellion Vivian lowered her eyes. She did not care what his attitude was. What should be done had to be done. You mean it's not just you? Hellion Vivian typed with her fingers and her expression was very indifferent. How many of you? There was a quick reply from the other side. What's your relationship? Colleagues, classmates, or friends? Hellion Vivian asked in detail. After all, under normal circumstances, it would not be so easy for malicious ghosts to appear if they were very popular. We are all graduate students. We are about to graduate. It was indeed difficult to tell if they were just chatting online. Let's talk about it when we meet. Give me your address. Chapter 1044. Yes, we're in the Wodaeku shopping district, a Korean restaurant. However, the other two still have to do experiments. Boss, can we meet in the afternoon? Wodaeku again? It seemed that most of the universities in Beijing were there. It felt like the people who got into trouble were all concentrated in this age group. It was probably because she was too impetuous, so it was easy for resentment to grow. Hellion Vivian replied with okay, and then wrote down the contact details. It was about 10 o'clock now, so there was still some time before the afternoon. In the past, she would still be lying in the coffin in His Highness's arms at this time. Such a scene had never happened before. Hellion Vivian looked at Beligaju, who was sitting in front of her and drinking blood. He was still very cute. She just couldn't find the problem. If she had known earlier, she would have caught Yu Lao and beaten him up. As expected, people in love weren't so open-minded. The more she cared, the more she couldn't ignore some things. Hellion Vivian thought that she was already very good at chasing people. After all, she had the aura of a domineering Sioux. No matter when, Hellion Vivian was always very confident in her position. Speaking of which, would she get any inspiration from reading novels? Hellion Vivian had always been a person of action. She jumped up from the bed and found a more remote place. Of course, she couldn't do this in front of His Highness. Otherwise, how could she get him drunk at night? Beligaju watched her movements and spat out the blood bag from his thin lips. His long and narrow eyes narrowed. "Hello, young Master Tang?" Hellion Vivian felt that it was a little awkward to talk about this kind of thing. What's your wife's phone number?" The man raised his eyebrows playfully and stopped cooking the noodles. "Why are you looking for my wife?" "Well, isn't she writing novels? I want to talk to her about some women's topics." Hellion Vivian's voice was lazy. "It's not convenient for you to listen. Hurry up and tell me her phone number." The man smiled. He rolled up his military uniform with one hand and put the phone on his shoulder. He was incomparably handsome. "I won't say." Hellion Vivian. Why did she have such a boss and good friend? He really deserved a beating. "You seem to be very angry?" The man's lips curled into a mischievous smile. "Is there a problem with your man?" Hellion Vivian chuckled. "If you're too smart, you'll be silenced. There are so many people who want to assassinate me. It won't be troublesome to add one more." The man paused as if he had thought of something. He said to the little blonde who was still typing, "Do you want an egg?" "Yes, yes, yes." The little golden retriever immediately came over and commanded the man, "Add some baby cabbage and 2 eggs, one for you and one for me." Hellion Vivian listened carefully to the movements on the other side. Suddenly, her thin lips curved and her voice became louder. "Is it Mrs. Tang? Mrs. Tang?" The little golden retriever tilted its head with its chopsticks in its mouth. "Was it calling me?" The man looked at her round eyes and slightly red face and said with a faint smile, "She is indeed looking for you. She said she wants to talk about women." Little golden retriever took the phone and said cautiously, "Hello." Hellion Vivian chuckled and said, "Hello, Mrs. Tang." The little golden retriever's ears were a little hot. Although they had been married for a long time, it seemed that no one had called her Mrs. Tang. The most important thing was that she liked this name. "Yes, yes." The little golden retriever listened to Hellion Vivian with a serious face. Then, ignoring the man who was cooking noodles behind her, she took the phone and walked to the study. "According to my experience, this kind of thing should be done by force." Hellion Vivian thought about the scene of Mr. Tang being raped and fell silent. It was too cruel. Even Mr. Tang dared to rape her. What kind of person was he? "Hello? Why don't you speak?" The little golden retriever chuckled. "Do you also think that my method is super invincible? Think about it. You're an arms tycoon. It's natural for you to be on top." It was very rare for the two of them to hit it off so decisively in terms of positioning. Hellion Vivian immediately accepted the little golden retriever's proposal. "Do you have a more detailed plan?" "Of course." The little golden retriever immediately said, "Is there any wine at home? Get him drunk first. Then get a pair of handcuffs. Use a harder one to open and hide the key well. As long as you can handcuff him to the bed, he'll be at your mercy. In the past, when I was dealing with Fox Tang, I used this trick. Drunken mess. After that, Fox Tang cried and asked me to take responsibility. You should know that women like us will definitely take responsibility for men to the end." Hellion Vivian didn't speak because she couldn't imagine what kind of scene it would be. Wait a minute. Any handcuffs in Mr. Tang's hands should be unlocked in minutes. That person maintained the national record for weapon disassembly. What was a pair of handcuffs to him? Unless Mr. Tang was willing to do it. In other words, he deliberately got drunk and then let others take responsibility for him. Shameless, too shameless. However, Mrs. Tang's idea could be considered. Ordinary handcuffs didn't work on His Highness, then what about other things? "I understand. I'll do as you say." Hellion Vivian also laughed. "When the time comes and it's successful, I'll tell you." "Okay." The little golden retriever happily hung up the phone. When she turned around, she saw the man leaning against the door frame and staring at her. His legs were very long and his military uniform was straight. However, the collar was pulled open by her when he kissed her just now. It made him feel sexy and seductive. Suddenly, she remembered the two of them in bed this morning and couldn't help but blush. But that wasn't the point. The point was he didn't hear what she said on the phone just now, right? The noodles will get cold if you don't eat. The man walked over and looked down at her bare feet. He sighed helplessly. How many times have I said that even if the room is carpeted, you have to wear shoes? Give me your hand. I'll carry you to the living room. The little golden retriever was still guilty. Of course, she would do whatever the man said. After all, judging from his reaction, he probably didn't hear what she said. But what she didn't expect was that as soon as the man carried her, he opened his thin lips and kissed her ear. The corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. Why didn't you tell her that I made you cry that day? The little golden retriever trembled. Before she could stop him, she was pressed into the soft sofa by the man. Then his slightly cold lips landed on her body again and again. He restrained her wrist with one hand, not giving her a chance to get up at all. He really did hear it. What about carrying her to the living room? It was all a lie. Oh. Chapter 1045. On the other side, Hellion Vivian still didn't know the consequences of her call. She was observing His Highness's actions with a frown. She didn't really want to force herself on His Highness. She just wanted to sleep with His Highness in her arms. However, he didn't seem to like touching her anymore. Therefore, she had to use some other methods. Since she wanted to lock him up, she had to think carefully about how to lock him up. Hellion Wei Wei stroked her chin with her fingers. In any case, judging from the current state of His Highness, it should be easier to deal with him than when he was an adult. When the time came, she just had to think of a way to get him drunk and handcuff him. Then she could sleep peacefully with him in her arms until dawn. What are you thinking about? A voice suddenly sounded in her ear. Hellion Vivian looked up and saw Beligaju looking at her with one hand on the table. No, nothing. Hellion Vivian immediately stood up. I just received a job. I'm going out in the afternoon. Pack up. With that, Hellion Vivian didn't care about the reaction of the person behind her. She turned around and went into the bedroom. With a certain someone's sharp eyes, she couldn't hide it well. She might be exposed. It was better not to let the person in question know that she had locked him up in bed. He had to plan well. Bailey Jiaju looked at the side of the closed wooden door. That pair of deep eyes became darker and darker, as if a storm was brewing. What was her reaction just now? Was she avoiding him? Sure enough, he couldn't let his guard down. His fingers slowly clenched and hung by his side. In an instant, a thick black fog filled the entire study. Beligaju raised his hand and gently licked the blood off his fingers. His silver hair fell down, making it impossible to see his expression. However, the half-curled corners of his mouth clearly showed his demonic nature. I can't control myself anymore. Beligaju chuckled. With a move of his fingers, the wooden table next to him instantly turned into ashes. It was as if he had done some special effects. There wasn't even a sound. When he turned around, there was a thick layer of wood shavings. Some wood shavings were still floating in the air. The demons shivered and did not dare to come out of the black fog. Beligaju took off the black gloves that were stained with blood and threw them aside. His voice was very cold. Clean this place up. Yes. The demons lowered their heads, wondering when the Cold War between Wang Fei and Master would end. If it didn't, the next time Master would shatter them instead of the wooden table. Hellion Vivian didn't see this scene. If she knew that no matter what form he took, it wouldn't affect Beligaju's combat strength, she would never have thought of getting him drunk and taking him to bed. Unfortunately, Hellion Vivian was still unaware of this loophole. Her plan was completely based on Beligaju's current state. It was almost 2 o'clock by the time he was done with these things. Hellion Vivian looked at her watch and pulled over a black backpack. There were many professional things in it. After all, the previous clients were all one person, but this time there were 4 of them. If she had to bring 4 people to the crime scene, it wouldn't be easy to control. The human heart was the most difficult to predict. If someone had thoughts that they shouldn't have, it would give the evil ghost a chance to take advantage of them. It was better not to have something as troublesome as being possessed by a ghost. Hellion Vivian took a few dog blood red ropes and put them in her backpack. Probably because she was about to grow into her human form, she could actually change her clothes. She took off her kasaya and put on a simple pure white t-shirt, denim hot pants, and a bright collar around her neck. There was a bright black gem on the collar. She matched it with a pair of Muji 90 sunglasses and put them on her head. The phoenix scimitar turned into a large Bodhi prayer bead and circled around her slender wrist. This outfit made Hellion Vivian look like a high school student who had just graduated. The shoes on her feet were the popular Givenchy canvas shoes. Her whole person was brimming with a youthful aura. Coupled with her long and curly hair that hung straight behind her waist, she always made people's eyes light up. What's more, she was riding a BMW Tomahawk. Get in. Hellion Vivian put on her sunglasses and looked sideways at Beligaju. Her long legs supported the ground. She looked very handsome. The more she was like this, the more he wanted to bully her. He wanted her to only look at him and helplessly hold his neck. Beligaju's eyes darkened for a moment. Then he curled his lips and smiled meaningfully. Yes, my master. Hellion Vivian sat in the front. She had always driven fast. With a move of her right hand, the BMW Tomahawk rushed out like a line. Beligaju's hands, which were wearing black gloves, were placed by his side. He never raised them. After Hellion Vivian stopped the car, she realized that from the beginning to the end, a certain highness didn't even touch the corner of her clothes. Hey. Hellion Vivian had the urge to ask clearly. Beligaju turned his head. Although his fluffy white ears were hidden, his face was still very delicate. What's wrong? Nothing. Hellion Vivian put on her sunglasses and covered her eyes guiltily. She couldn't ask. What if she got a worse answer? Moreover, if she asked, a certain someone would definitely be on guard against her. How could she get him drunk then? So it was better to leave it at that for now. I'll do it later. Be careful to hide your identity. After all, it's daytime now. What was she talking about? She clearly didn't want to talk about this. Bailey Jiaju took a step forward and paused for a moment. Then he turned around and looked at her deeply. That look made Hellion Vivian feel an inexplicable stab of pain. Don't worry, my respected master. I won't let anyone know that I'm a demon. Bailey Jiaju's thin lips curled up. He was clearly speaking the same incomparably gentlemanly words as before, but Wei Wei indeed heard that faint mockery from within. Mockery? Hellion Vivian paused and wanted to explain. Aren't you leaving? He had already pushed open the door of the Korean restaurant. His indifferent back view was filled with rejection and alienation. Hellion Vivian couldn't immediately follow him. After all, she had to stop the car. However, the two of them had never been like this before. Because of a misunderstanding, there was a distance between them. It seemed that the more she explained, the less she got to the point. Was it because she cared too much? The more she was worried about losing him, the more she was worried about hearing the answer. That was why she changed the topic like this. However, it was obvious that this method was useless. Tonight, when night fell, she had to completely resolve this matter. No matter what, she just wanted a quick end. Chapter 1046. This was because it wasn't time for dinner yet. Hence, there weren't many people in the restaurant. However, the decorations were especially beautiful and had the characteristics of a cave. As soon as she pushed open the door, she could see Quan Jilong's billboard. The heavy metal atmosphere was very strong and Big Bang's song was playing. As soon as Hellion Vivian entered, her gaze fell on the innermost table before she even took 2 steps. Because there were only 4 people sitting there. It was obvious that they were indeed postgraduate students. 3 of them were wearing glasses. There were 2 girls and 2 boys and they were all dressed very casually. Hellion Vivian walked towards them. The atmosphere between the 4 of them was very solemn. They didn't order anything to eat. Instead, they each ordered a cold drink with an ashtray in the middle. All of them had their heads lowered and no one knew what they were thinking. One of them sensed that Hellion Vivian was walking towards them, so she tugged at the blue shirt next to her. Jing Tian, someone's here. Is it the Taobao shop owner you contacted? The person named Jing Tian raised her head and the other 2 did the same. Hello, I'm Hellion Vivian. I'm from the Yin Yang shop. Hellion Vivian was very straightforward and didn't say anything unnecessary. Can you tell me what happened that day? It's best if you can be more detailed. The 4 of them didn't speak because they never expected that the master they were looking forward to would be a high school student. And such a beautiful high school student? The young man behind her was even more indescribable. He looked like he was in his 3rd year of middle school, right? However, he had a handsome face that made people want to scream, short silver hair and the clothes he was wearing. A black tuxedo? Tight gloves without a single wrinkle? What era was this outfit from? Hellion Vivian saw that the 4 of them were still sizing her and Beligaju up, but she didn't rush them. After all, from a psychological point of view, Most people wouldn't believe in the existence of experts younger than them. The four of them had the same expression on their faces, and they looked at each other for a long time. In the end, it was Xiao Jingtian who was in contact with Hellion Vivian who spoke. Are there only two of you in the shop? Where's your manager? I am the store manager. Hellion Vivian smiled gently. You can tell me anything. Xiao Jingtian was still hesitating. She glanced at her three companions beside her. No one said anything. She didn't know how to continue. Originally, she had found this Taobao shop on the internet. Many people said that this shop was very effective. She also went into the Taobao shop and specifically looked at the positive reviews. Although there were very few people who left a review, basically maintaining one review every 2 days, every review was very real. Didn't seem like a gimmick. What they were most afraid of now was encountering a warlock who didn't know anything. It was said that the yin and yang trade was very profitable. 9 out of 10 feng shui masters were fake and the remaining one might not be famous. After all, in this era, everything was hyped up. She had also asked her family to look for Master Xiao Yun, who had been on TV recently. When the other party heard that someone had died, he didn't even dare to pick up the call. He only said that he was too busy recently and needed to cultivate. Xiao Jingtian didn't believe him at all. In the past, when did he not show up when money was spent? All they did was use ghost shell divination to fool people. This time he definitely didn't show up because he was afraid. The more the situation was like this, the more Xiao Jingtian didn't dare to trust people casually. Hellion Vivian also saw her concerns. Since you've come to me, you should have seen the rules of my shop. If the matter isn't resolved, I won't charge you a single cent, so there's no element of deception in this. When Xiao Jingtian heard her say this, she also felt that it was a little rude. Shop owner, we didn't mean that. It's just that this matter is no small matter. We're just afraid and don't know what to do. Besides, to be honest, your age is beyond our expectations. Age doesn't affect one's profession. Hellion Vivian's lips curled up. There's no yin energy here, so I can't prove it, but I can do a simple divination for you. From your looks, you have good fortune and are destined to be rich and powerful. Since you're still a graduate student and don't have a job, it means that your family is in business. Xiao Jingtian's eyes widened as if she couldn't believe that the other party could guess what her family did after just meeting her for the first time. After all, among these students, only one knew about her family background because she usually didn't dress conspicuously and had always been very ordinary. The woman in pink sitting next to Xiao Jingtian was also shocked by Hellion Vivian's deduction. Jingtian, could it be that when the two of you were chatting earlier you sent her some kind of message? For example, you could name any price you want. No. Xiao Jingtian was sure that she hadn't said anything. The other two boys stared at Xiao Jingtian with wide eyes. You're in a big business? Xiao Jingtian originally didn't want too many people to know about her family while she was in graduate school. After all, her father's business was too famous in the area, and sometimes it was really troublesome. But since it was like this now, there was nothing to hide. My father is Xiao Haidong. The CEO of a certain corporation often appeared on the news. The two men were obviously shocked by this sudden news and looked at Xiao Jingtian in a daze. They didn't expect that Xiao Jingtian, who they thought came from a small city, would have such an identity. Hellion Vivian didn't seem surprised at all and looked at the four of them with a smile. Xiao Jingtian still didn't understand. How did you know? There must be something that she hadn't noticed because she never believed in fortune-telling. You're wearing short-sighted glasses. Hellion Wei Wei's voice was very calm. It's not cheap. Most of the short-sighted spectacles worn by students cost between 600 to 800. Yours should be around 3,000. Also, the necklace you're wearing around your neck, although it's not made of gold, it's not cheap either. The latest model from Dior should cost a few thousand. I can see that you have a dignified character and don't seem like someone who takes the wrong path. You also know very well how to talk to people and make them accept you. These are all related to your family's upbringing. It should be that your family often takes you out to eat with the elders. Most of these people are businessmen, so I'm guessing that your family does business. After all, people from a small town shouldn't be so generous with their money. Moreover, you're very low-key and know how to hide your wealth. This means that you don't want people to notice your family. After listening to Hellion Vivian's analysis, Xiao Jingtian's admiration for her almost exploded. She was even more professional than the police. Chapter 1047. So now, can you tell me what exactly happened? How did they die? Hellion Vivian sat down. The smile on her face never disappeared, making her feel very comfortable. The four of them looked at each other and one of the boys said hesitantly, "It was an accident. We didn't expect it at all. There was no experimental class on Wednesday afternoon, so the few of us agreed to play an escape room together. We chose a horror-themed game called Sobbing Otaku." Sobbing Otaku? Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows. What kind of name was that? The boys spat. That's right, it's Sobbing Otaku. We wanted to play something that other people wouldn't dare to play. After all, we were all science and technology students, so we weren't too resistant to this kind of thing. In fact, that escape room was scarier than we thought. When we went in, we wore blindfolds and the person in the back put his arm around the person in front of him. There were 5 of you and when you went in you formed a straight line, right? Hellion Vivian quickly reacted. At that time there shouldn't have been any problems. Xiao Jingtian looked at her in shock. He guessed it right again? There's no need to guess. Hellion Vivian chuckled. The way you walked is called the Pure Yang technique in formations and it's used to ward off evil spirits. Generally, when you walk like this and wear blindfolds, you won't look left, right, front, or back and you'll be able to form a formation. This kind of formation can play a protective role to a certain extent. The 4 of them didn't know that there was such a thing. Hellion Vivian took out her phone and waved it. Continue. After we opened our blindfolds, we entered a very ordinary escape room. The room was very small and we needed to find clues to open 3 locks, the boy said in a low voice. Originally, there was no problem until the last lock was opened and a wardrobe popped out. That wardrobe can only fit 1 person at most. A sliding wardrobe? Hellion Vivian had obviously played this game before, so she quickly guessed the main point. You need to go in 1 by 1 to find clues? The boy nodded and said with some difficulty, I was the first to go in. The setting inside was very scary and I was shocked at the time. I was separated from another room and there was only a flashlight, and it shone on a woman in white hanging. That was the scariest moment. I hurriedly asked them to come over. I waited until I was scared because it was too scary. After we came over, we didn't want to stay in that small place any longer, so we quickly took a picture of the clues and wanted to go out. To be honest, I was really scared at that time. I didn't want to be the last to go out, but I can't let a girl be the last to go out. When Qinyang saw that, he said that he would be the last to go out and asked us to go first. After we went to the main hall, we pulled the wardrobe to get him to come over. But no one expected that something would happen at that time. The boy reached out and covered his face, his whole body trembling. After we went out, we wanted to pull him back, but we found that the wardrobe seemed to be stuck by something. No matter how hard we pulled, it wouldn't budge. At that time, a woman's cries began to sound in the secret room. There was also Qin Yang's voice. He seemed to be convulsing. We were scared and tried to pull the wardrobe, but no matter how hard we pulled, it wouldn't budge. We started to shout Qin Yang's name and hit the wardrobe, but it didn't work. I hurriedly pressed the walkie-talkie to call the shop owner who had escaped from the secret room. After he came in and cut off all the power in the secret room, the wardrobe was pulled out. Then we found Qin Yang. He was already lying there. Hellion Vivian paused for a moment and put the phone on the table. Then how did the woman's cries come about? Was there a sound effect in the secret room, or did you really hear something that others couldn't hear? We don't know. The 4 of them looked at each other again. In the end, they gave Hellion Vivian an answer with uncertainty. Hellion Vivian stood up. Then we can only go back and play again to understand the rules. Now? Go back and play again? One of the girls widened her eyes. She was the only one who wasn't wearing glasses, so her fear was particularly prominent. No, we can't. Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows. Why? It's only been a while since the murder happened. Would they let people play again? The girl stuttered. That place was cordoned off by the police some time ago. How could they possibly reopen? Hellion Vivian lowered her eyes and looked at her. You also said that it was a while ago. The person you're talking about should be long gone, right? How do you know? Xiao Jingtian was really admiring this high school student shop owner more and more. Hellion Vivian laughed. Generally speaking, when a murder case like this happens, the police won't be able to give any clues. Even if you're close friends, you wouldn't think of asking a yin-yang master to deal with this kind of thing. You're just postgraduate students at the same university. Although you're usually close, you don't actually talk about everything, right? Otherwise, how could you not know about each other's family situation? Since your relationship was so ordinary, you probably wouldn't have kept harping on this matter in the beginning. After all, you still need to study. Moreover, the police also said that they didn't have any clues, so the possibility of it being an accident is very high. Of course, this matter will definitely leave a shadow in your heart. You'll definitely have nightmares at night, and you'll also see a psychiatrist or something. These are all normal, but after going through these stages, you'll probably deliberately choose not to mention this matter. After all, everyone subconsciously chooses to forget the terrifying memories and avoid touching them if possible. It's best if this matter can become a secret. I believe that at that time, whether it's the school's leaders or outsiders, they'll keep asking you about this matter. It wasn't easy for you to deal with all these things. So how could you let this matter become the center of your worries again? Bringing it up again means that you'll fall into that nightmare again. Since it's so painful, why are you still so concerned about it? It's very simple. It's not that you want to do anything for the dead person, but that you're afraid of something unknown. The four of them suddenly froze. Their expressions were constantly changing and everyone's expressions were different. However, this meant that Hellion Vivian's words had once again hit the nail on the head. Xiao Jingtian clenched her fists and said unwillingly, "Shop owner, aren't you going too far by saying this? It's as if I only care about myself and don't have any humanity." Chapter 1048. After hearing Xiao Jingtian's words, Hellion Vivian wasn't annoyed. Her voice was calm as she said, "What you're showing now is true humanity. I'm not saying that this is bad. If you really didn't have any kindness in your hearts, you wouldn't be here. For example, you could have relied on your family's ability to get your parents to send you abroad, but you didn't do so. This means that you want to solve this matter not only for yourself but also for your dead friend. There are many gray areas in this world and everyone wants different things. But now, none of the four of you want to experience such a terrifying thing again, right? Or perhaps your current life has already caused you trouble, and you have to solve it eventually. If you don't want to face unknown dangers again, then solve it completely today and play again." After hearing Hellion Vivian's words, the four of them fell into deep thought as if they were considering it. In the end, Xiao Jingtian was the first to break the silence. "Then let's play again." "Very good." Hellion Vivian smiled and looked to the side. "What about the others?" The three graduate students looked at each other, and the scared girl also clenched her fists. "Let's play again." "In that case, let's go." Hellion Vivian picked up her sunglasses and phone from the table. "It's only 4 in the afternoon, so it's not dark yet. Although it's best to play at night because it's an escape room, let's go tomorrow. That way you guys won't be so scared." The two men felt embarrassed to be told that they were scared by a high school student, so they reached out and scratched their heads. The escape room was in an old alley in Beijing. The alley was very deep, but it was very well known. This escape room was also very popular on the internet. Before Hellion Vivian set off, she asked Monkey to help her quickly check it out. Although there had been all kinds of rumors about the escape room before, nothing had ever happened. Instead, many people said that the place was not clean. But it was precisely because of this that it attracted more enthusiasts to play it. After all, playing an escape room was all about excitement and nervousness. The escape room was indeed closed for a period of time because of the graduate students. However, under normal circumstances, as long as the case was over, the location of the incident would reopen. However, after all, such a terrifying thing had happened before, so even though 4 months had passed and the secret room had reopened, there were not as many people who came to play as before. It was more than a little desolate. Especially with the theme of the sobbing house, no one dared to enter it again. By the time Hellion Vivian and the others arrived, the shop owner had already locked the theme. Obviously, he was not going to accept any more customers. Of course, when the shop owner looked up and saw the 4 people, his expression froze. It was obvious that he recognized them as the graduate students who had played the sobbing house theme back then. "You still dare to come?" If it weren't for that incident, his business wouldn't have been so miserable. Xiao Jingtian was a little embarrassed. "Store owner. How unlucky. I won't be opening for the next 2 days. You guys should be the same. Ever since that time, you definitely don't want to play the secret rooms anymore. Aren't you afraid?" The shop owner really didn't understand what young people were thinking these days, but this time he wasn't going to entertain them anymore. Hurry up and go back. Hellion Vivian moved to the side and stood in front of the shop owner. Psychologically speaking, the more afraid you are of something, the more you have to face it in order to free yourself from it. I don't think you've had too many customers during this period of time, right? Don't you want to restore the flow of customers here? Besides, after what happened, no matter where you open a shop in the future, you'll be questioned. Many people will be worried about their safety and won't dare to come here to play. If we can play it again, the shop owner's reputation will be restored, and this shop will no longer be a deterrent. No matter what, it's a good deal for the shop owner. Of course, the shop owner knew that if someone could play it again, it would be a good thing for him personally. However, he said, I don't want you to take that risk again. As he spoke, he laughed bitterly. I even wanted to knock down the sobbing house theme and renovate it again. But even so, I can't sell these rooms anymore. This is a place where every inch of land is worth its weight in gold. Who would have thought that it would become like this? In Beijing, no one dares to buy a place where there has been a murder case. I'm also very particular about this. Something happens to you guys again, what should I do? Actually, I'm a yin yang master. I specialize in helping people deal with things that aren't too clean. Hellion Vivian smiled lightly and zipped up her school bag. These are all my tools. Since you're doing a supernatural theme, you should have some understanding of these things. The shop owner looked at the things in front of him and was completely stunned. The dog blood red rope, the yellow talisman, the compass, the yin-yang fish, and the 8 trigrams. Every one of them symbolized Hellion Vivian's identity. Hellion Vivian smiled again. Before entering the shop, I deliberately observed that there are 4 rooms here. The windows of each room are facing the sun. The windows of the other 3 are closed and only one is open. However, that room has 2 locks. If I'm not wrong, that's the sobbing house. The windows are opened for exposure to the sun. In such a day, the yang energy is the strongest. Moreover, the house here occupies the dragon vein. After exposure to the sun, it's very difficult for there to be any undead in the room. So shop owner, let's go in. What are you worried about? If the shop owner was still doubting Hellion Weiwei just now after hearing her opinion on feng shui, his attitude suddenly changed. With a relaxed smile on his face, he said, I have seen many self-proclaimed masters, but you are the first person who can see that there is a dragon vein here at a glance. Shop owner, you're not simple either. The setting is very particular. Hellion Vivian looked up. Especially the zhong kue on the door wall. Ghosts can't enter. When the shop owner heard this, he knew that he had met an expert this time. In fact, he wanted to solve the current problem more than anyone else. He had invited many friends to watch the scene. Either he didn't have the slightest bit of real knowledge, or he kept shaking his head after reading it and couldn't say anything. But today, this little girl's every sentence was straight to the point. Perhaps if it was her, she could really solve his dilemma. Why do you want to play it again? When Hellion Vivian heard the shop owner's words, she knew that the shop owner had a chance to change his mind. The corners of her mouth curled up meaningfully. Because when people are afraid, it's easy to reveal flaws. Chapter 1049. The shop owner didn't quite understand Hellion Vivian's words, but he had already made up his mind to let her play the game again, so it didn't matter what kind of answer Hellion Vivian gave at this time. The shop owner took out the walkie-talkie and eye masks and placed them directly in Hellion Vivian's hand. I'll open the door to the sobbing house in a while, then I'll lead all of you there. During this time, all of you have to wear eye masks. The person behind you will put his hands on the shoulders of the person in front of you. When I say you can open your eyes, you can open them. When you're in the secret room, if you have any questions or want to get any clues, you can use the walkie-talkie to ask for help. Hellion Vivian counted the eye masks. There were 6 in total. She frowned and then pointed at Beligaju with her chin. Just give me 5. He's not going in. Beligaju, who had been standing at the side all this time, was shocked. Then his thin lips curled up. Is this an order from master? That smile was very cold. It seemed like he was unhappy. Unhappy? Hellion Vivian suddenly paused. She felt that there couldn't be any more misunderstandings at this time. She had to speak properly. It's not an order, Hellion Vivian said vaguely. It's just that it's not appropriate for you to go in with us because of your status. When the 4 graduate students at the side heard this, They looked at Helly and Vivian with condemnation in their eyes. It was as if they were saying that in this day and age she was still judging people based on their status. However, Beligaju understood what she meant. After being stunned for a moment, he really smiled. I can go in alone first, then you guys can come in. Alone? The shop owner shouted. No. That's too dangerous. The other 4 people were also worried about letting such a beautiful young man go in first. If you're not afraid and want to go in with us, then go in together. Why do you have to be separated? Even if we're your boss, there are some things you can ignore. It was obvious that Xiao Jingtian's words were meant for Helly and Vivian to hear. After all, this was the first time she had seen someone treat an employee so kindly. To be honest, although she admired this exorcist shop a lot, she didn't like her. This person was too utilitarian and thought of everyone's human nature in a very dark way. Therefore, she and this kind of person were born to be at odds. Helly and Vivian never liked to explain things, especially to outsiders. She smiled and ignored Xiao Jingtian's words. Instead, she turned to Beligaju and said, Ju will do as you say. You go in first. All right. Beligaju chuckled and took a step forward. His gloved hand gripped the iron lock, and with a flick of his finger, the wooden door in front of everyone immediately opened. No one knew what method he used to unlock the door. Even the innkeeper was dumbfounded with the key in his hand. He had locked the door twice. Wait a minute. Xiao Jingtian stopped Beligaju. Are you really going in first? It was very dangerous inside. What's more, you have to cover your eyes. What if something happens? Beligaju didn't answer her, nor did he ask the innkeeper for a blindfold. Instead, he took out a black handkerchief from the pocket of his black suit jacket and casually tied it behind his head. His eyes were covered, leaving behind his exquisite facial features that made people's hearts pound even faster. There was still a smile on his face. After all, only he understood that someone didn't want him to go in with everyone. It was obvious that she was protecting him. After all, once the pure yang formation was formed, if he followed behind, he would either destroy the formation's effect or be affected by the yang energy and become uncomfortable. Was she treating him the same way she treated the little devil? Huh. She was so cute and careful with him. Because they suddenly remembered that the person who had unlocked the first combination lock was the deceased, Zhang Heng. Chapter 1050. In an instant, everyone shuddered in fear. Hurry up. Turn on the walkie-talkie and ask the shop owner what the password is. Someone was already starting to get scared. It was the girl who was already very timid. The other 3 people were also a little uneasy, especially the boy who was holding the walkie-talkie. He was so scared that his hands were trembling, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't turn on the walkie-talkie button. Helly and Vivian watched from the side and reached out to stop their movements. Her voice was calm as she said, "It's just a very normal recording. What are you guys so nervous about? You're even holding the walkie-talkie upside down." The 4 of them looked at each other and didn't say anything, but it was obvious that some of them were sweating profusely because of some unknown matter. Helly and Vivian continued, "Also, you don't need to ask the shop owner. It's not that difficult to enter the next level." As she spoke, Helly and Wei Wei turned on the flashlight and focused the beam of light on the ceiling beside the clothes. There was a couplet written there which seemed to be used to suppress evil spirits. The ceiling beside the couplet was obviously different. "This is a secret door, reuniting after 60 years of age? Try 141. The timid female graduate student immediately entered the password according to Helly and Vivian's instructions. With a click, the safety lock was opened. The female graduate student's eyes widened and she looked at Helly and Vivian in shock. "You're so smart." Xiao Jingtian also glanced at Helly and Vivian. "How did you guess it? Even Zhang Heng couldn't solve it so quickly back then." Reopening means that there are 2 chances. 70 multiplied by 2 is 140. Reopening means that there are 2 chances. 70 multiplied by 2 is 140. Reopening means that you add 1, and the final result is 141, Helly and Vivian said as she shone the flashlight on the safe. Xiao Jingtian wasn't so scared anymore, but she suddenly remembered something. "Where's your assistant? Why aren't you worried about him at all?" Helly and Vivian turned to look at her and called out into the darkness, "Ju." After a while, a tall and slender figure walked out of the darkness. There was a smile on his face. "I'm here." Hellion Vivian nodded and continued to study the safe. Xiao Jingtian didn't say anything else. Hellion Vivian was very focused. After all, if His Highness came in alone and didn't have her spiritual aura as a cover, no matter how much he tried to hide his devil aura, it would still remain and affect the aura in this room. In other words, even if there were dead spirits here, they should have all been scared away by His Highness. Therefore, Hellion Vivian was not worried that the four of them would be possessed by ghosts. If that was the case, then she could focus on the clues. That's right. From the very beginning, Hellion Vivian found it strange. The reason for that was because she suspected that there was no vengeful spirit this time. The reason was very simple. If there really was a ghost killing people, this should be a place where it was easy to condense resentment, which was why it could cause evil spirits to kill people. However, after Hellion Vivian arrived, she realized that this secret room didn't attract resentment as easily as other places. Although there were many realistic settings inside, the shop owner happened to be someone who knew feng shui, so the layout of each room was quite particular. He even knew how to use pure yang energy to dry the room to achieve a certain effect of getting rid of resentment. Of course, no matter what kind of feng shui array it was, it couldn't stop evil spirits from hating people. Then she would start from the second point. If this evil spirit was attracted by this group of people, then the person who was killed by the ghost would become a vengeful spirit and stay in this secret room forever. Wherever there was a vengeful spirit, there would be a certain amount of supernatural events. However, the shop owner himself wasn't affected by any resentment. As soon as Hellion Vivian entered, she observed the shop owner's face and didn't find anything wrong with him. Moreover, if there was really something scary here, the shop owner would definitely sell this courtyard house immediately. He didn't move out immediately, which meant that there was nothing unusual here except for the murder case. In other words, the person who was killed wasn't killed by a ghost. However, it was obvious that the death of the deceased wasn't an accident. In this way, there was only one possibility left, which was that a person killed someone. In other words, what was in front of her was a secret room murder case. Hellion Vivian glanced at the female graduate student who was still trembling and the other three people. Logically speaking, if it was a secret room murder case, the shop owner should be the biggest suspect. After all, he was the one who was most familiar with this secret room, so it would be easy for him to kill someone. However, before coming here, Hellion Vivian asked Monkey to investigate. There was nothing suspicious about this shop owner who escaped from the secret room. He didn't even know these people at all. In other words, the shop owner had no motive to kill people. Hellion Vivian only squatted down for a few seconds, but her thoughts never stopped. There wasn't enough evidence. In any secret room murder case, the most important evidence would stay at the first scene. Other than the police, no one else had been here, which meant that the crime scene was relatively well protected. This was also one of the reasons why Hellion Vivian ruled out the shop owner as the murderer. If the shop owner was the murderer, he could have demolished this place after the investigation. However, he didn't do that. She could only continue to look for him. She had to play until the victim was killed. Hellion Vivian quickly locked her thoughts and shone the flashlight into the safe. What's this? The photo. That's the background of the story. The boy holding the walkie-talkie said, "The origin of the sobbing house is because 6 good friends agreed to go on an adventure together. However, during the adventure, one of them died in the house because of the cowardice of the other 5. Many years later, when the 5 of them stepped into the sobbing house again, they had to find the sins they had committed back then and sincerely repent before they could clear the level." Hellion Vivian's eyes flashed. "How do you know so much?" "When the 5 of us came to play, we all read the introduction online," the boy replied. Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows. "All 5 of you have read it?" "Yeah." The boy was very confused. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." Hellion Vivian's finger brushed past it and her eyes lowered slightly. This meant that they weren't completely unfamiliar with the secret room. If the murderer knew how to clear the level in advance through the internet, it would be best if he was more prepared than the others. He could use the mechanisms here to kill people. Of course, this was just her hypothesis. But if her hypothesis was correct, then one of the 4 people would definitely be the murderer. Chapter 1051. Hellion Vivian raised her head and glanced at each of them. What kind of reason would make her or him kill someone who could be considered a good friend? And why would they choose to do it in a secret room? She still had to continue looking for evidence. At the very least, she had to figure out if there was any conflict between these people. Most of the murders that happened at this age were due to love. After all, they didn't have any interests involved. So here was the problem. Although these people often came out to play, they weren't a couple. How could such a thing happen? Helene Vivian couldn't figure this out either. She looked at the photo in her hand again. There were 6 people in the photo, but one of them had been scratched out with something like a knife. There was a sentence written below. Have you forgotten my name? What's going on? Helene Vivian asked the boy who was holding the walkie-talkie. Was the photo like this when you first came here? The boy nodded. Yes. Is that so? Helene Vivian narrowed her eyes. Is the password for one of the locks a 4-digit English alphabet? The other boy was surprised. How did you know? She clearly hadn't checked the lock here just now. It's obvious that this photo gave us a hint. Helene Vivian shone the flashlight on the person's name that had been scratched out. This person's name is Chin Hong and the password is Hong Hong. Xiao Jingtian looked at Helene Vivian in shock. In just a few minutes they had already opened the second lock. All 4 of them remembered that the first time they came to play, they wasted a whole 10 minutes on the first lock, not to mention the second lock, which no one could unlock at all. If they hadn't asked the store owner for a hint and the store owner hadn't told them to pay attention to the sentence in the photo, "Have you forgotten my name?" they wouldn't have been able to figure out what the password was at all. You're so smart. The timid girl couldn't help but exclaim. Helene Vivian chuckled softly and pretended to reply casually, girls don't actually need to be so smart. It's good to be as pretty as you. That's how you'll attract boys. Not at all. The girl blushed at the compliment, but she raised her head. Obviously, she enjoyed Helene Vivian's compliment. The rest of the people also relaxed because of the topic of Helene Vivian. They chatted with each other and didn't seem as scared as they were when they first came in. The 5 of you always hang out together. Haven't you thought about finding a girlfriend? Helene Vivian asked the boy who was holding the walkie-talkie. The boy pushed his glasses up his nose bridge. I haven't considered that yet. Oh? He hasn't considered it. What about you? Helene Vivian looked at the boy who was flipping through the clues. You're so tall and your face is so tough. Don't tell me you haven't thought about finding a girlfriend? As soon as Helene Vivian said this, the expressions of the 4 people changed at the same time. This was especially so for Xiao Jingtian. Her face was a little pale and she didn't know why. The timid girl and the boy who was holding the walkie-talkie looked at each other, then quickly looked away. All of their reactions indicated that they were hiding something. Helene Vivian stopped in her tracks and looked at these people with her arms crossed. After a while she said to Xiao Jingtun, Miss Xiao, since you want to solve the problem, then tell me all the secrets. Otherwise, it'll be very difficult for me to help you solve the problem. I don't think we need to talk about that, right? The timid girl looked at the tough boy and whispered softly. The boy lowered his head and said, It's okay. Tell us. Since it's helpful to us, then tell us everything. Xiao Jingtian clenched her fists and said, A long time ago, there were actually 6 of us who would come out to play together, but no one knew why. One day, Dong Sijie suddenly jumped off a building and committed suicide. Because of this, we were depressed for a long time. Dong Sijie was beautiful and got along well with everyone, so all of us liked her very much. The boys also wanted to pursue her, but she only liked Fei Yang. She waited for Fei Yang to play basketball and washed his clothes for him. In order to be closer to Fei Yang, she did so many things. However, before Fei Yang could be with her, Xiao Jingtian didn't continue speaking. It was only then that Helene Vivian found out that the tough and handsome boy was called Chen Fei Yang. However, could things really be as simple as Xiao Jingtian said? Under normal circumstances, the more beautiful a girl was, the more envied by others. How could she make everyone like her? Helene Weiwei was almost 100% sure that at the very least, that timid girl didn't really like this girl called Dong Sijie. This was because when she mentioned how she pursued Chen Fei Yang, the girl obviously curled her lips. The relationship between these 6 people seemed ordinary, but in fact it was very complicated. 3 boys, 3 girls. Usually they would get along very well. But if these 3 girls all liked the same boy, then things would become very complicated. From the way they acted just now, Helene Vivian was sure that whether it was the timid female graduate student Xiao Jingtian or Dong Sijie who had committed suicide previously, the one they liked was this boy named Chen Fei Yang. Then what was the relationship between the other 2 boys like? Helene Vivian had no idea. However, her intuition told her that Dong Sijie's suicide a year ago was decisively related to this murder in the locked room. Hellion Vivian glanced at the photo again and then thought about the background story here. Was it a coincidence? There were also 6 people, but 1 had left, so there were only 5 left. And the first time this group of people entered the locked room, there were also 5 people. Countless cases told us that the scene of a murder would unconsciously reflect the strongest desire in the murderer's heart. And all the recordings and furnishings in the locked room reflected that someone was emphasizing that they shouldn't forget the person who died. If they forgot and didn't repent for their sins, they had to stay. That was why this locked room murder case happened. If it weren't for the information from Monkey's investigation, Hellion Vivian would definitely suspect the shop owner again. For example, she would guess that the shop owner might be Dong Sijie's brother or some other relative, but he wasn't. The shop owner really had nothing to do with these researchers. Then who on earth wanted to convey this message to them? Hellion Vivian almost instantly eliminated 2 people in her heart, and in the end only 2 other people were left. They were Qin Feiyang and the boy with the walkie-talkie. It was very simple. Because the person who did this must have liked Dong Sikhan very much. Chapter 1052. He was avenging Dong Sikhan. He believed that these people had something to do with Dong Sichuan's suicide. After all, the background story of this locked room also mentioned that the death of the girl in the photo was because of the other 5 people. Moreover, as soon as they entered the locked room, there was this sentence in the recording: "What sin did you commit? Was it indifference, selfishness, or arrogance?" Hellion Vivian narrowed her eyes. This wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't a coincidence that the murderer chose this place to commit the crime. What's wrong? Xiao Jingtian didn't understand why Hellion Vivian was suddenly so silent. Her instincts told her that this shop owner probably knew something. Hellion Vivian pretended to stand up casually. "If I said that Dong Sichuan's ghost came back to seek revenge on you, what would you think? Seek revenge on us? Why?" Xiao Jingtian snorted and glanced to the side. Her reaction was indescribably strange. It seemed like she was afraid but also disdainful. Hellion Vivian looked at her and didn't say anything else. The rest of the people also turned to look at her. Qin Feiyang's brows furrowed even more. He looked straight at Xiao Jingtian as if he didn't want her to be so rude to Dong Sikhan. Xiao Jingtian also noticed that everyone was looking at her. She clenched her fists and tried to explain herself. "I just thought that we were so close, so why would she come to seek revenge on us? This doesn't make sense at all." "Since it doesn't make sense, why did you have such a big reaction just now?" Hellion Vivian's tone was very calm. "From the beginning I felt that something was strange about you guys coming to me. It's just a dead person, so who can tell if there's really a ghost? But you guys insist that there's an evil spirit." At this point, Hellion Vivian narrowed her eyes. She had believed in an old saying since she was young. If you haven't done anything wrong in your life, you won't be afraid of ghosts knocking on your door in the middle of the night. This so-called evil spirit was obviously a figment of these people's imagination. So what exactly had they done to make them so afraid? Did they think that an evil spirit was following them? Is this evil spirit Dong Sikhan? Hellion Vivian looked at Xiao Jingtian. The latter did not say anything. Instead, he glanced at Qin Feiyang. "Miss Xiao, I'm asking you, is Dong Sikhan the evil ghost in your mind?" Hellion Vivian was obviously not going to let go of this thread that she had pulled out. But for Xiao Jingtian to admit that she had a guilty conscience in front of these good friends, she simply couldn't do it. "So what if it is her? Even if we feel that she's back, it doesn't mean that we've done anything to let her down. She ended up like this because she didn't know how to behave properly. Not only did she treat her male classmates that way, but she also treated her professors that way. In the end, someone found out about something bad. We didn't promise to help her keep it a secret, so she committed suicide. How can we be blamed for that? But her soul just won't let us go." Qin Feiyang pulled the girl over with a bang. "Who are you calling immoral? That's enough. Stop arguing." Xiao Jingtian stood in front of the 2 of them and pulled Qin Feiyang's hand away. She lowered her head and laughed. "Why are all of you so agitated when it comes to her?" Qin Feiyang turned his head and glanced at Xiao Jingtian as if he wanted to explain, but in the end he didn't say anything. Qin Feiyang's attitude probably hurt the female graduate student, because her eyes turned red. Xiao Jingtian raised her head and looked at Hellion Vivian. You're really smart. That's right, the evil spirit in my mind is Dong Sikun. In fact, our relationship isn't as good as it used to be, because I've never seen such a cheap person who orders men around so naturally. Not only does she chase after men, but she also lowers the standards of us girls as a whole. So you don't like me either. Hellion Vivian chuckled. As I order my assistant around too. Xiao Jingdun was stunned for a moment before she said, yes. Very good. I think I understand now. Hellion Vivian didn't continue asking. Instead, she shone the flashlight at the secret door on the ceiling. Is that door the second to last level? The place where Zhang Heng died? She needed more clues. Before she found these clues, she wouldn't tell these people what she had already deduced. Obviously, these clues were hidden in the secret room. Yes. Xiao Jingtian was stunned by Hellion Vivian's sudden change of topic. There is indeed a problem there. Hellion Vivian raised the key she had taken from the second level. Where does this key open? Xiao Jingtian paused for a moment, then raised her hand and pointed to another room. Hellion Vivian didn't hesitate and immediately opened the door with the key. As soon as she opened the door, she saw a line of eye-catching words written in red on the wall. When a person has nowhere to go, the first thing they think of is committing a crime. However, it's not shameful. It's nothing more than cutting off all of their escape routes. In addition to this line of words, there was also an old photo in the small room. It was a photo of the dead girl and two other girls. In the photo they were all smiling happily and there was nothing unusual about them. Hellion Vivian lowered her head and seemed to be lost in thought. She couldn't get an answer. When you guys passed this level back then, who came up with the idea? It was Fei Yong. Xiao Jingtian walked over and said, at that time he asked all of us to stand in and try closing the door. There was immediately movement in the room from before, but even now we still don't understand why he wanted to close the door. Hellion Vivian shone the flashlight on the wall. Because of the hint in this sentence, cutting off all of one's escape routes is very likely to get someone to close the door. After all, there is only one escape route here. You thought of it just now, Chen Feiyong suddenly said. Why are you asking who came up with the idea? Hellion Vivian reached out and pulled the door open. I'll tell everyone the answer at the end. Now come in and close the door first. No one wanted to stay here any longer. If they could get out of these levels as soon as possible, of course, everyone was willing to do so except for the murderer. After Hellion Vivian finished speaking, no one objected. The wooden door was closed and even His Highness and Hellion Vivian were locked in a small room. After less than 3 seconds, there was a bang and there was movement outside the room. Hellion Vivian opened the door and swept the flashlight again. An unknown object popped out from the ceiling. Chapter 1053. In the secret room, the woman's voice sounded again. It seems that until now you still don't know what crime you've committed. It doesn't matter. I'll give you one last chance. This is the only way to get out of here. As long as you find the answer, I'll forgive you. Hellion Vivian listened carefully to the recording. The word forgive was very important. This further proved that her train of thought was correct. She strode towards the prop that popped out from the ceiling and reached out to straighten it. It was a simple staircase made of springs, but it was sturdy enough. It was obvious that they had to climb up to reach the next level. Let's go up, Hellion Vivian said again. However, at this time the timid female graduate student shook her head desperately. I don't want to go. It's too scary. You don't understand at all. The deeper we go, the scarier it gets. I really don't want to experience that fear again. Can I wait for you here? Hellion Vivian looked back at her. Are you sure you want to wait here? Haven't you noticed? What? The female graduate student didn't understand why Hellion Vivian was asking her this. Hellion Vivian shone the flashlight at the door they came from. This is a 3-lock design. When this staircase pops out, the door we came from will automatically lock. This lock is locked from the inside of the secret room. Unless we unlock all the mechanisms, we won't be able to get out. Aren't you afraid of waiting here? Of course, the female graduate student was afraid. She felt that something would pop out of this secret room with every step she took. Furthermore, there was the matter with Dong Sikun. She felt that that woman had returned and wanted to kill all of them. Okay, let's climb up according to the order we came in. Hellion Vivian glanced at the female graduate student again. I'll take Zhang Heng's place and bring up the rear. Scope. No matter how scared the female graduate student was, she had no choice but to follow him. This was because her escape route had been cut off. No one knew what was in the other room. If she stayed here alone, what would happen? Just thinking about it made her feel scared. After the few of them went up, they arrived at a dark tunnel. The tunnel looked like a scene from the movie Resident Evil, when danger was chasing after them outside. Those who survived had to escape through the tunnel as soon as possible. No one knew what they would encounter in the tunnel. It was said that the unknown was the most terrifying. But His Highness, who was walking at the front, didn't seem to have this problem at all. A few people looked on helplessly as Bailey Jiaju slid down into the darkness. His back was straight and handsome. His black gloves did not even touch the dust on both sides of his body. The female graduate student turned around and asked Hellion Vivian, "He should be younger than us, right? Isn't he afraid?" "He's more daring." Hellion Vivian calmly lied. After all, if she revealed His Highness' true age, it would definitely frighten a group of people. After Baligaju left, the 5 of them joined together to form a new pure yang array. Hellion Vivian was the last to go up, and nothing happened along the way. Sliding down the tunnel suddenly opened up and they arrived at another room. The decoration of this room was obviously a school rooftop. Other information hadn't been revealed yet. But why would there be a school's rooftop in an old house? This made Hellion Vivian very puzzled. Could it be? Did Dong Sikhun commit suicide by jumping off the rooftop of your school? Hellion Vivian asked. The other 4 people were caught off guard and froze. It wasn't until Chun Feiyong answered in a deep voice that the other 3 people had expressions on their faces. Hellion Vivian used a flashlight to illuminate the surroundings. She jumped off the building at night, right? How did you know? Even Chun Feiyong's tough face showed surprise, let alone the other people's reactions. Hellion Vivian raised her chin. There are stars and moons on the wallpaper. It's a hint of time. But what does this have to do with Dong Sichun's death? The female graduate student was confused. She didn't understand how Hellion Vivian could deduce that the woman jumped off the building at night just by looking at a secret room. Hellion Vivian didn't answer this question. Xiao Jingtian looked at her and asked, "Do you know something?" "I do know something, but I'll have to wait until the end." Hellion Vivian tapped her finger on the wall. "Come on, let's go to the next level. There's a 4-digit lock here. Do you still remember what day Dong Sikhun jumped off the building?" Chun Feiyong said, April 17, 2015. To be precise, it was the early morning of April 17, 2015. The boy holding the walkie-talkie pushed up his glasses. After midnight that night, someone heard the sound of something falling from the rooftop. Later, the police called us in for questioning. They said that Sikhun died between 1 and 1:30 in the morning and asked us if we knew what happened. That's right. Chun Feiyong frowned. At the time, the police asked us a lot of questions, including whether we knew if Sikhun had suicidal tendencies. At the time, I thought it was very strange. Why would they ask us that? Later, it was confirmed that it was a suicide, but there was no reason for it. In order to suppress the impact, the school left the matter unsettled. Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows. So you think it's very inhumane of the school to do this? Isn't it? Chun Feiyong sneered. Hellion Vivian's thin lips curled up. It's indeed very inhumane. What about the other students? If it's like the police said and someone knew in advance that Dong Sikhun had suicidal tendencies, but they didn't stop her, then don't you think they're even more inhumane? She didn't even think about jumping off the building. Chun Feiyong's words were almost resolute and decisive. Hellion Vivian's eyes flashed, and her words were very sharp. How can you be so sure that she didn't have suicidal tendencies? Chun Feiyong suddenly paused and continued, I just know. Based on my understanding of her, I don't believe that she would be so open and casually choose to end her life by committing suicide. In other words, you relied on your own intuition to determine that Dong Sikhun didn't commit suicide, right? Hellion Vivian chuckled softly and put away the flashlight. Her gaze was serious. You're lying. Chun Feiyong's expression immediately changed. Hellion Vivian's voice was still very slow. Everyone's intuition comes from a reason. When I asked you just now, you clearly paused, which proves that you're hiding something. Chapter 1054. Before I unlock this lock, Mr. Chen, I want to hear what you're hiding. Hellion Vivian held the iron lock. Her previous easygoing attitude was gone and she looked like a queen. Her aura was so strong that no one could refuse her. Qin Feiyong stood there and his eyes started to wander. It was obvious that he was trying to avoid something. Xiao Jingtian stepped forward to smooth things over. It's been so long, so there's no need to bring it up again. Shop owner, let's hurry up and get out of here. It's too dark here. Tingting and I are really scared. If you're afraid of Dong Sichuan's ghost, then there's no need to. Hellion Vivian turned around and looked at the other three people. Because Zhang Heng's murderer isn't an evil spirit, and Dong Sikhun hasn't come back yet. From the moment I came in, I didn't notice any ghosts here. It's just that the setting is a little scary. Xiao Jingtian's face was full of disbelief. You're saying that we're overthinking everything and that Zhang Heng's death was an accident? Then, there was obviously something else behind that word. But Xiao Jingtian didn't say anything. She swallowed her words and shook her head again. That's impossible. Of course Zhang Heng's death wasn't an accident. Hellion Vivian's voice was very calm. Someone is avenging Dong Sikhun. In other words, one of the four of you is the murderer. What? Xiao Jingtian's eyes widened. The others were also shocked. Their expressions were magnified and they looked like they were in complete disbelief. But Hellion Vivian knew very well that one of them was lying and acting. Her tone was as calm as ever. Based on what you said just now, I've basically ruled out two suspects. One is you, Miss Xiao, and the other is Miss Tingting. It's obvious that the two of you don't have a good relationship with Dong Sikhun. Could even be said that you hate her. Since that's the case, you probably won't think of avenging her or anything like that. As she spoke, Hellion Vivian's gaze fell on the two boys. Qin Feiyong paused. The other boy holding the walkie-talkie also paused. Only someone who liked Dong Sikhun would avenge her, because the murderer felt that Dong Sichuan's death was directly or indirectly related to all of you, Hellion Vivian continued. So, who do you think the remaining two people are? Xiao Jingtian and the timid Guo Tingting widened their eyes again. How is that possible? No, I don't believe it. Guo Tingting glanced at Qin Feiyong as she said, just because someone is dead doesn't mean that there's a murderer among us. There are so many traps in this secret room. Even if someone is going to kill someone, it should be the shop owner, right? Hellion Vivian didn't tell them that she had already investigated the shop owner. Instead she smiled and said, you're right. The shop owner could also be the murderer. I knew it. Guo Tingting seemed to be relieved. Hellion Vivian asked again, if the shop owner is the murderer, what is his motive? Guo Tingting paused because she couldn't answer at all. Hellion Vivian shifted her gaze back to Qin Feiyong. So Mr. Chen, if you don't explain clearly what you're hiding, I'm very likely to think that you're Zhang Heng's murderer. Qin Feiyong's face turned pale. Do you think we'll believe you just because you say that? It's so dark here. How can we kill someone? Don't you think you're being a little too imaginative? This isn't an imaginative idea, Hellion Vivian smiled. As for how to kill someone, I believe we'll be able to find it in the next level. Qin Feiyong didn't back down. Perhaps your analysis makes sense, but do you know that all of us were separated from Zhang Heng? We were in another room, so how could we have gone to that room to kill him? Through the wall? Of course not. Hellion Vivian scanned the surroundings with her flashlight. All of the murders in secret rooms require the use of tools to complete the entire crime. There are so many mechanisms here, so any one of them can be modified slightly to become a murder tool. Mr. Chin, the three of you are all scientific researchers, and you just so happen to have minors in the field of mechanism disassembly and assembly, so it shouldn't be difficult for you to modify a mechanism, right? Qin Feiyong shook his head. You must have read too many novels to have such a rich imagination. I've always had a good relationship with Zhang Heng, so why would I want to kill him? If you really want to know why I'm so sure that Sikhun wouldn't commit suicide, I can tell you that after we finished our questioning that day, we overheard the police's suspicions. They suspected that Sikhun might not have committed suicide because there are always signs of suicide. She had clearly found an internship company and was going to report to the company tomorrow. She even happily invited us out for a meal the day before and said that she had entered a very good company. Jingtian should know about this company. It's one of the top few companies in the country and it belongs to the Shao Corporation. Is that true? Hellion Vivian turned her head and asked Xiao Jingtian. Xiao Jingtian's face suddenly stiffened, and an extremely complicated look quickly flashed across her eyes. Her hands that were hanging by her sides also slowly clenched. That's right. Hellion Vivian noticed her unusual reaction and her thoughts sank. Everyone here seemed simple, but in reality they all had their own thoughts. And when these thoughts were connected they would form an answer. But none of them were willing to tell the real truth. You all know about this? Hellion Vivian asked again. Gutingting and the other boy nodded in agreement. That day when we were eating, Dong Sikhun even showed off her salary to us. Gutingting pursed her lips mockingly. She said that she could earn 100,000 yuan a month as soon as she graduated, and that she was working in the CEO's office. She was usually very relaxed, so she told us not to be too envious. He probably wanted to show Jingtian who was the boss. After all, Jingtian was much better than her in research, so she wanted to compete with Jingtian in terms of salary. That woman probably didn't expect that no matter how much money she earned, she was still working for Jingtian's family. A graduate student who had just graduated was assigned to the CEO's office. And this graduate student's studies weren't even considered outstanding. Besides, wasn't 100,000 yuan a month a little too high? Hellion Vivian wasn't familiar with this, because she had always been doing business for herself and had never worked before. She could only turn around and ask His Highness, Ju, how much do you pay Special Assistant Long a month? Baligaju raised his eyes to look at her, then gently tilted his head. His black fingers pressed against his thin lips, and after rubbing them a few times, the corners of his mouth curled up into a half-smile as he gave Hellion Vivian an answer. He never seems to ask for a salary. Chapter 1055. Hellion Vivian. She shouldn't have asked His Highness this question. After all, the people who followed His Highness were all hot-blooded mythical beasts. Their loyalty could be witnessed by the sun and the moon, so they really didn't need to be paid. However, if it were me, I wouldn't arrange for a woman to be in the CEO's office. Baligaju's figure didn't change. He was still a head shorter than Hellion Vivian, but his tone was very domineering. But Hellion Vivian originally thought that he would talk about her ability. After all, Dong Sikhun had just graduated. Logically speaking, she wasn't suitable for that position at all. Unexpectedly, Baligaju chuckled softly. He looked at her with his deep eyes and said in a bewitching voice, because I'm worried that my master will be jealous. What was this feeling of being teased again? Hellion Vivian coughed lightly. Although she did care a little, His Highness probably wouldn't do something like keeping a secretary. Wait a minute. A beautiful female university student. She had no background and no real talent, yet she entered the CEO's office. This was very abnormal. Hellion Vivian didn't know if she was thinking too much. She looked in Xiao Jingtian's direction and said, This company is your father's. Miss Xiao, do you know how Dong Sikhun was assigned to such an important position in the CEO's office? I've never been familiar with the matters in Dad's company. Xiao Jingtian's expression was a little stiff, as if she didn't like to talk about this matter. Hellion Vivian saw her reaction and asked casually, Then what about your mother? She doesn't know about this either? Miss Hellion. Xiao Jingtian seemed to have touched on some secret, and her reaction became particularly intense. Why are you always asking about unimportant things like this? We invited you here to help us solve the problem. What does this have to do with my mother? Hellion Vivian's eyes were indifferent. It doesn't. Why are you so agitated? I just don't understand the meaning of your question. After Xiao Jingtian's breathing stabilized a little, she looked at Hellion Vivian and appeared a little fragile. I'm sorry, I lost my composure a little. My mother doesn't know anything, so don't drag her into this. Hellion Vivian took a deep look at Xiao Jingtian. Okay, since that's the case, I want to ask you directly. Is there some sort of shady relationship between your father and Dong Sikhun? What did you say? Xiao Jingtian didn't say anything. Qin Feiyang and the other guy shouted at the same time. Hellion Vivian turned her gaze to them and smiled gently. Very good. This is the reaction I wanted. Seems that you guys really care about Dong Sikhun. What's there to care about? Qin Feiyang's eyes were red. How can you insult people like that? What shameful relationship. You've been spouting nonsense since the beginning. Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows. Nonsense? Mr. Qin, let me remind you that whether or not it's nonsense is up to Miss Xiao to decide, not you. That's impossible. That's right. Xiao Jingtian raised her head. In that instant the hatred in her heart surpassed any fear. That day I went to my father's company and saw the two of them in his office with my own eyes. I've really never seen a woman as cheap as Dong Sikun. She does like Qin Feiyang, but she likes men who can bring her benefits even more, like my father. She's such a cheap woman, yet you guys actually treat her like a princess and think that she's perfect in every way. What a joke. Are all men so stupid? Whether it's you guys or my father, all of you are the same. You're all played by her and think that she's so pure. It's really funny. Can't you see that she's so obviously vain? Qin Feiyang was shocked. He looked at the tears falling from Xiao Jingtian's eyes and seemed to want to say something. However, Xiao Jingtian didn't look at him. Instead, she turned around and held her breath for a moment. I've already said what I should say. What else does Miss Hellion want to ask? Do the police know about these things? Hellion Vivian's tone was very calm. Xiao Jingtian frowned. Yes, they asked me about these things. Okay, I understand. Hellion Vivian's gaze shifted. I just said that someone wants to avenge Dong Sikun. He likes Dong Sikun to the point that he's almost stubborn. Of course, I'm not sure if he knows what kind of person Dong Sikun is, but it's obvious that he doesn't intend to just kill one person to end this matter. He first killed Zhang Heng, then continued to follow and observe you guys. This is also why you guys keep thinking that there are ghosts around. In fact, it's not that Dong Sikun came back, but that there really is someone around you. Furthermore, he's preparing to kill the second person he thinks is unforgivable during this escape room game. At this point, Hellion Vivian paused for a moment. If I'm not wrong, Miss Xiao, the next person he wants to kill is you. That's why you feel it so strongly. Xiao Jingtian froze. That's impossible. Why is it impossible? Hellion Vivian glanced at Qin Feiyang. Do you think that the murderer won't kill you for Dong Sikun? Xiao Jingtian's whole body trembled. Then she laughed bitterly. Oh, I'm thinking too much. It's very likely that he'll kill me for Dong Sikun. Who is he? Hellion Vivian asked directly. Xiao Jingtian didn't say anything. Hellion Vivian's voice was very calm. Or you can tell me who you think the murderer is. I don't want to say. Xiao Jingtian's left hand hung down weakly, and the other hand pressed against her forehead. Hellion Wei didn't continue to ask. She took a step back, which was a rare occurrence. It wasn't because of anything else, but because this girl was very similar to her in her memories. That kind of suffering seemed like no one would understand. The suffering of pretending that she didn't know anything in order to protect her mother when her father cheated on her. In addition, the boy she liked might even kill her for the sake of that mistress. It was probably very painful. Perhaps it was so painful that she wanted to die. However, Hellion Vivian still hadn't found conclusive evidence to prove that Qin Feiyang was the murderer. So she wouldn't make any conclusions. However, Guotingting couldn't accept such an outcome. Her eyes shook as she looked at Hellion Vivian. Her voice trembled as she said, "You're saying that he's going to kill a second person for that bitch? Since he can kill the first person in this secret room, he can kill the second." Chapter 1056. Hellion Vivian reminded Guotingting, "Don't forget about the recording we heard when we opened the third level. Seems like you guys still don't know what crime you've committed. That means he won't stop his crime because in his heart, Dong Sichuan's death is related to all of you. He still hates all of you." That's too scary. Guotingting's whole body trembled. How could he kill a second person here? How could he kill her in front of so many people? Hellion Vivian's voice was very calm. When Zhang Heng died, wasn't it in front of so many people as well? No, I still don't believe it. Guotingting bit her lip. There must be some misunderstanding. Hellion Vivian looked at her. There can't be a misunderstanding. I have a guess in my heart now, but it's not convenient to tell you guys. Let's go to the next level first. I still have something to look for. Only then can I really determine who the murderer is. Of course, I also want to warn the murderer here. Don't even think about making a move in front of me. Hellion Vivian picked up the metal lock and turned around. Be careful or you'll lose more than you gain. The two boys had different expressions, but they looked at Hellion Vivian with the same unwillingness. Hellion Vivian chuckled as if she didn't care at all about how they looked at her. Dong Sikun jumped off the building on April 17th. The sign in the room symbolized the time, which meant, Unlocking the password to the rooftop was the date of Dong Sichuan's death, 0417. The door was unlocked and a sliding wooden cabinet popped out. People entered the wooden cabinet and used their arms to support themselves against the wall to enter the next level. The wooden cabinet wasn't big and it could only fit one person at most. In other words, they had to pass through the next level one by one. Hellion Vivian narrowed her eyes. Who was the first to enter this wooden cabinet? Me. Qin Feiyong stood up. When we first played this secret room, I was the one who took the lead. Hellion Vivian smiled. Not all of you went in, right? Yes, only I, Zhang Heng and Xiaodong have been inside. Qin Feiyong laughed coldly. What did that make you think? Hellion Vivian tapped the wooden cupboard with her finger. Zhang Heng was killed at this stage. Only those who have entered have the chance to kill him. So you still think one of us is the murderer? Qin Feiyong continued to sneer. Just because Sikhan is dead we have to kill all our friends? Don't you think that's too far-fetched? Mr. Qin. Hellion Vivian interrupted Qin Feiyong. What if Dong Sikhan didn't commit suicide but was murdered? Then wouldn't the murderer have a reason to kill in order to avenge her? Everyone was stunned by Hellion Vivian's words. Guo Tingting and Xiao Jingtian in particular looked at each other and saw the same expression on each other's faces. Murdered? You mean to say that someone killed Sikhan? The eyes of the boy holding the walkie-talkie shook. Hellion Vivian's voice was as calm as ever. That's right. Since the police gave you some information, it means that someone found something from this information. It's actually very simple. When the police asked you to go in for questioning, it was also because they suspected that Dong Sikhan didn't commit suicide but was murdered. However, at that time, there was probably pressure from the school and the Shao Corporation to bribe them with money, so the matter didn't blow up. Moreover, when someone dies at school, suicide is always less impactful than homicide. As long as the parents are appeased, it won't attract too much attention from the media. However, a homicide is different. The police will try their best not to think about that possibility. Moreover, to conclude that it was a homicide, they must have found conclusive evidence. That night, Guo Tingting, as a roommate, didn't tell the dormitory manager that her roommate didn't come back. There was a whole 6 hours between the time the victim died and the discovery of the body. No matter how much evidence there is on the rooftop, it should have been taken away by the murderer long ago. That's why the police concluded that it was a homicide. However, there must be something else in the police report that makes them suspect that it was a homicide. I don't understand. Are you saying that the murderer killed Dong Sikhan and then killed Zhang Heng? Guo Tingting's eyes were a little dazed when she said this. Hellion Vivian pressed her forehead with a headache. It was really tiring to talk to people who didn't make logical deductions. However, there was a very important secret that she had just found out. The person who killed Dong Sikhan and the person who killed Zhang Heng are not the same person. This is a case within a case. Hellion Vivian's sharp gaze swept over everyone. Guo Tingting felt a little scared. A case within a case. To put it simply, someone guessed from the police that the person who killed Dong Sikhan was among you, and that's why he hated you. He must have been looking for an opportunity to kill you, but he couldn't find the right time. It wasn't until you decided to come to this secret room that he thought of a perfect way to kill you. Furthermore, this person knows that you have a ghost in your heart. This ghost is the dead Dong Sikhan. He used this to make you live in fear and be on guard against the dangers that you imagined while planning how to kill you. To the murderer, the more afraid you are of Dong Sikhan, the more suspicious you are. During this time, he observed each and every one of you and finally confirmed that it was Zhang Heng. However, he soon realized that he had killed the wrong person because Zhang Heng wasn't the person who killed Dong Sikhan. At this point, Hellion Vivian paused. In other words, there are now 2 murderers hiding among you. One is the person who killed Dong Sikhan, and the other is the person who killed Zhang Heng. That's ridiculous. Qin Feiyong was the first person to growl. The other 3 people also looked like they had been punched. They looked at each other and their eyes were full of wariness. Should they say that Hellion Vivian's speculation was too shocking? But where did this strange feeling come from? Hellion Vivian chuckled. Whether it's ridiculous or not, we'll be able to verify it once we enter the cabinet. However, since the murderer is so smart and is so proficient in the mechanisms here, it will definitely be dangerous for anyone to enter alone. In order to prevent anything bad from happening, as the one who accepted the deal, I will enter the cabinet first. You all wait outside. You want me to wait outside as well? Beligaju, who had been silent all this time, raised his head and looked deeply at Hellion Vivian. Those beautiful eyes made it impossible for anyone to refuse. Hellion Vivian pointed at the cabinet. Only one person can enter. Then I'll go in. You wait outside. But Hellion Vivian was still worried. You actually like him a lot, right? Xiao Jingtian suddenly asked in a low voice. Why did she doubt the shop owner's sincerity towards the young man before? Hellion Vivian admitted it very quickly with a smile on her face. Of course, this man can easily make me not like myself. I'm always worried about personal gains and losses, and I even have doubts from time to time because of what other people say. I think that I'm not that important to the other party. But just now, when I thought about it carefully, it doesn't matter if he's important or not. In any case, he's very important to me. Xiao Jingtian was stunned. She had never seen such a person before. He was as tough as a tree and his entire body seemed to emit a dazzling light. Hellion Vivian didn't waste too much time. With a twist of her wrist, an invisible current seemed to gather in her palm. The phoenix's clear trace echoed in the small secret room before anyone could react. The cabinet was pulled back to its original position by her. At the same time there was a click. The sound of a lock being unlocked came from the other side. A hidden secret door was pulled open heavily with the wind blowing in both directions. Bailey Jiaju stood in the darkness. Behind him were 4 sharp steel pipes inserted into the ground, flickering with an ice-cold luster. However, he seemed to be completely fine. His tightly clasped black gloves were still wrapped around his slender hands, and the black suit on his body didn't have a single wrinkle. He looked at Hellion Vivian and smiled. Too many things popped out, so it took me a little time to solve the problem. Everyone, they were scared to death here. He actually solved the problem. It hadn't even been a minute since he entered, right? How could he solve it so quickly? Hellion Vivian was also looking at His Highness secretly. After all, just the escape room alone once again proved that His Highness seemed to be smarter than her. No matter how fast she solved the problem, it would still take her 3 to 4 minutes. This guy didn't even take a minute. Was he looking down on her IQ? What? My respected master, do you feel that your IQ has been crushed? Beligaju chuckled softly and glanced at the wardrobe beside him. Do you still like to use violence to solve problems? Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows and retracted her hand. She decided to ignore a certain someone's words. Otherwise she would be killed by his poisonous tongue. This is called taking a shortcut. Tell me what you encountered. Beligaju looked especially harmless when he smiled. Does encountering a lot of attacks count? But it's still quite fun. We can play this kind of game more in the future. Hellion Wei had a feeling that His Highness was serious when he said that. He was actually interested in escape rooms. However, Hellion Vivian looked at the sharp steel pipes and narrowed her eyes. Zhang Heng was nailed to this room by these steel pipes, right? Chapter 1058. Yes. Xiao Jingtian finally came back to her senses and looked at Beligaju with shaky eyes. Wasn't this too amazing? There were so many steel pipes coming at him from all directions and the room was very dark. Yet he was actually able to solve the problem while avoiding these steel pipes. Gutingting also felt that this young man was a little inhuman. Where did this monster come from? He actually found this situation interesting. No matter how others looked at him, Beligaju still had a mesmerizing smile on his face. At the same time, there was an innate coldness in his eyes. Other than Hellion Vivian, it was as if he didn't care about anyone else. Hellion Vivian walked into the dark room. Because the mechanism had been triggered just now, a long-haired human head popped up from the ceiling. It always made people feel uncomfortable hanging from the ceiling like that. Other than the flashlight, there was no other light in this room, and there were dried bloodstains on the ground. This place was very much like a haunted house and it was more eerie than anywhere else. Probably because someone had died here, Hellion Vivian could clearly feel the residual resentment in this place. The background of the room was like a female dormitory. There was also a wooden bed with bunk beds next to it. There were books on the cabinets and each of them was used for scientific research. The moment Gutingting walked in, she felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity. That sense of familiarity was indescribable, and the only feeling she had was that it made her hair stand on end. "This window is open?" Helene Vivian narrowed her eyes slightly as she looked at the sentence written in red handprint. "Those who know but don't say it will be considered guilty." Her voice was slightly deep as she said, "From here it's the previous level. Don't you think it's strange?" The boy holding the walkie-talkie looked in Helene Vivian's direction and suddenly froze. "You're saying that the murderer is telling us that someone saw something on the rooftop through this window, but she didn't say anything?" "That's right." Helene Vivian glanced at him. "How did you guess?" the boy exclaimed and then pointed at the sentence on the wall. "Those who know but do not speak are guilty." Based on what the shop owner said earlier, the murderer thinks that every one of us is guilty, and that's what I think it is. Then he scratched the back of his head. "Am I wrong?" Helene Vivian chuckled. "Oh, you are very smart. That is indeed the case. However, the murderer is not telling us. He is telling the people who saw something on the rooftop but didn't say anything." At this point, Helene Wei paused for a moment, then turned around and said to Gutingting, "Miss Tingting, I think you should know this better than anyone else. That day, what exactly did you see through the window of your dormitory and what happened on the rooftop?" "Me?" Gutingting's eyes drifted. "I don't know what you're talking about. That night I turned off the lights and went to sleep. The dorm auntie can testify for me." Helene Vivian looked at her. "You did turn off the lights early, but it wasn't because you wanted to sleep. It was because you could see the rooftop clearly from where you were lying. Turning off the lights would allow you to see more clearly." Gutingting's mind was guessed correctly. Her body suddenly trembled. "Why are you so sure that I saw it? This is just a small room in a secret room. How can you think of so many things?" Helene Vivian's voice was very calm. "Miss Tingting, haven't you noticed? The layout of this room is almost exactly the same as the dorm you live in." Gutingting suddenly paused. After Helene Wei's reminder, she finally realized where the source of that sense of familiarity came from. Why is the layout of this secret room like this?" Gutingting was obviously on the verge of breaking down. She was so scared that her whole body trembled. "Who is it? Why are they playing us like this? Do they like that woman that much?" She roared the last sentence at Qin Feiyang. She was angry and scared at the same time. Tears streamed down her face. Xiao Jingtian turned around and hugged her. Her arms tightened as she comforted her silently. Gutingting finally calmed down a little, but the corners of her mouth curled up into a cold smile. "That's right, I did hide some things. Qin Feiyang, Zhao Xiaodong, haven't you always thought that Dong Sikhun was so beautiful and pure? I'll tell you now what I saw that day. She was holding her head high and being intimate with someone, and that person was none other than Zhang Heng. That's why I said that among all of you men, only Zhang Heng could be considered smart. At the very least, he knew that a woman like Dong Sikhun would be able to climb into someone else's bed as long as he gave her some benefits. Besides, she doesn't lack men at all. Qin Feiyang, I used to like you, but I don't anymore. A man who takes a fancy to a woman like Dong Sikhun isn't worthy of me, Gutingting, to continue pursuing him. Besides, you actually wanted to kill us for that woman. It's fine if you did it to other people, but you actually had the heart to do it to Jingtian. Ah, you're really heartless. A man like you deserves to be played around by Dong Sikhun." "Are you done?" Qin Feiyang clenched his fists tightly, and his expression was very ugly. Gutingting's neck was thick and she still wanted to say something. However, she was interrupted by Helene Vivian. "This murderer is indeed quite stupid, but there aren't many men who aren't blind. That's why second-rate goods are only worthy of being played around by Dong Sikhun. Only those who aren't played around are worthy of you. So, Miss Tingting, other than that, what else did you see?" Halfway through their intimacy, they suddenly started arguing. They were probably worried that someone would hear them, so they didn't make a sound. They just pushed each other a few times. Later, the two of them moved to a place where I couldn't see them. After that, I couldn't see the two of them anymore. I think they probably made up again and I got bored watching them. Plus, I was really sleepy that day, so I fell asleep. After Gutingting finished speaking, she heaved a heavy sigh of relief. "Other than that, I don't have anything else to hide. In fact, there are many things about Dong Sikhun that I don't want to talk about. As her roommate, I clearly saw which professor she had an affair with and how she treated these men. But she's really something. She pretends so well in public. Should I say that women understand women better, or should I say that these men are brainless? Chapter 1059. The two men who were named didn't have a pleasant expression on their faces. Hellion Vivian didn't care what they thought. She looked at Gutingting and asked, "Is that all you saw?" "Yes." Gutingting didn't look into Hellion Vivian's eyes when she answered. Hellion Vivian paused. "If I were you, I would choose to tell the truth at a time like this." Gutingting was a little restless. "Can you guarantee that the murderer won't kill me?" "Of course." Hellion Vivian smiled. "And I'll find out who he is very soon." Gutingting hesitated for a moment before saying, "I was really asleep, but I didn't close the window and was bitten by mosquitoes. Just as I was about to light a mosquito coil, I heard a heavy sound of something falling from the opposite side. Then I looked up and saw a figure standing on the rooftop. It seemed like he was looking down." "So you saw Dong Sichuan's murderer?" Hellion Vivian narrowed her eyes. "Why didn't you tell the police about such an important matter?" Gutingting hurriedly explained, "They didn't ask me about this at all. Moreover, the school obviously wants to keep this matter under wraps. I don't know whether Dong Sikhun committed suicide or was murdered. How can I talk about this kind of thing so casually?" "Actually, this isn't the main point." Hellion Vivian's voice was very calm. "You didn't say anything because you don't like Dong Sikhun. Also, you're going to graduate in half a year. You don't want to get into any trouble because of this matter." Gutingting paused for a moment and her entire face turned red. "I really don't like her. Why should I take the risk to speak up for such a bitch?" "Okay, then let me ask you. Since you didn't tell the police about this matter, who did you tell?" Hellion Vivian went straight to the point. After all, this was the key to determining the murderer this time. Gutingting shook her head with a confused expression. "I'm the only one who knows about this. Think about it carefully. Have you ever accidentally revealed?" Hellion Vivian tried to recall Gutingting's memory, especially during this period of time. Gutingting still shook her head. Then she seemed to have thought of something and said, "But I have a habit of posting short stories. I wrote a short story about this incident and posted it on my WeChat Moments. But what's wrong with that? I've anthropomorphized everything. I didn't even mention the time and place. It's all in the eyes of the murderer, so there's a problem." Hellion Vivian's voice was very calm. "If I'm not wrong, when the police questioned you, they must have asked you if you saw anything on the rooftop. After all, that building was very close to your dormitory. At that time your curtains were drawn. As long as you weren't sleeping very deeply, you must have seen something. The police had asked you this question, and with the story you posted later, the murderer would quickly connect the dots and realize that you were actually lying at that time. This murderer might be very stupid when it comes to judging women, but he's very smart in other aspects. Otherwise, he wouldn't have used this secret room to kill someone." Gutingting's eyes trembled. When she thought about how all of her actions had been observed by the murderer, she couldn't help but feel scared. Hellion Vivian continued, "That's why he mistakenly thought that Zhang Heng was Dong Sichuan's murderer. Because of the short story you posted, in his eyes, other than Dong Sikhun, there was only Zhang Heng on the rooftop. The person who pushed Dong Sikhun down was definitely Zhang Heng." "Wasn't Zhang Heng." Gutingting vehemently denied. "I never said that the figure was Zhang Heng." Hellion Vivian looked at her indifferently. "Yes, you didn't say that the figure was Zhang Heng, but you also didn't tell the murderer that the figure was tall, short, fat, or thin. That's why he killed the wrong person." At this point, Gutingting didn't say anything and just lowered her head. "What I want to investigate isn't the previous case but the current one." At this point, Hellion Vivian looked up and glanced at Qin Feiyang. "Mr. Qin, now that things have come to this, are you still going to say that all of this is nonsense?" Qin Feiyang didn't say anything. His hands were clenched tightly. "I know you suspect me, but I can tell you that I've never killed anyone before. Since this is a murder in a secret room, it must have been planned from the beginning. This secret room isn't mine. No matter how much I know about mechanisms, there's no way I would use these mechanisms in an unfamiliar secret room. I think there should be guides on the internet regarding this secret room. Since you know the background story of this secret room, it's not impossible for you to find out all of the mechanisms." Hellion Wei Wei said slowly, "Moreover, you were the one who took the lead throughout the entire journey. You were the fastest in solving the problem. Although you didn't solve the last lock, it was obvious that the murderer was the fastest in solving the problem in this secret room. It was because this secret room was in line with all his inner desires that he chose to kill people here, right? Qin Feiyong was rendered speechless by Hellion Vivian, but he was a top student after all, so he reacted quickly. You've said so much, but where is the evidence? You haven't found any evidence yet and you're already certain that I'm the murderer? I haven't decided that you're the murderer. Surprisingly, Hellion Vivian gave him this answer. Qin Feiyong was stunned. The other three also thought that Hellion Vivian had decided that Qin Feiyong was the murderer. After all, from the looks of it, he was the most suspicious. Furthermore, it was clear that Hellion Vivian had suspected him from the beginning, so why did she suddenly say that she wasn't certain? I need to ask the shop owner some questions before I can organize my thoughts, so let's go out first. Hellion Vivian stroked the steel pipe with her fingers and looked at the red handwriting on the wall. Each handwriting represented an original sin. Jealousy, arrogance, indifference. Comparing all the original sins with their corresponding colors, a pattern was quickly discovered. With the 6-digit password, Hellion Vivian successfully opened the last safe. There was a letter inside. There was only one sentence written on it. I brought them here. That line of words was typed, so it couldn't be seen who wrote it. Naturally, it was also a prop in the secret room. Other than the letter, there was only one key here. It seemed to symbolize the end of the story and only one person could walk out. Hellion Vivian curled her thin lips, picked up the key, walked to the side and clicked. The wooden door opened. The shop owner was waiting for them in the courtyard outside the door worriedly. Chapter 1060. Did anything happen to you guys? Cold sweat broke out on his forehead. He didn't forget how the last young man died. He was stabbed to death by these steel pipes. Hellion Weiwei chuckled. There was a small accident, but it's still within control. I went in too quickly just now, so I didn't ask about many things in detail. Shopkeeper, do you still remember who told you to order the Sobbing House theme when these people first came to play? I don't remember clearly, but now that you ask, it seems to be this young man. The shop owner turned to look at Qin Feiyong. Qin Feiyong sneered. We decided to play this secret room together. When I called to book it, they were beside me. I wasn't the one who suggested it. Hellion Weiwei only glanced at him and didn't reply. Instead, she furrowed her eyebrows. He felt strange. That's right. Shop owner, why are these steel pipes so sharp? Hellion Vivian looked at the shop owner's face, trying to find some clues. Aren't you afraid that the players will be in danger when they play this secret room? The shop owner paused for a moment before saying, in the game, there's no mention of steel pipes poking down. That's why I'm curious as well. Where did these steel pipes come from? These steel pipes are used when installing mechanisms. You're the person who opened this secret room. How can you not know that they might pop out? Hellion Vivian didn't believe this excuse. When the shop owner heard Hellion Vivian's question, he realized that she had misunderstood. Master, although I know a little about feng shui, I'm not familiar with these mechanisms. Moreover, this game wasn't created by me. In our line of work, if we want to maintain the novelty of the game, we have to change the theme after a while. Otherwise, all the passwords will be easily cracked. When that happens, people will look at the guides online and become less and less interested. Also, escape rooms like us pay a lot of attention to attracting returning customers. Of course, the theme of the secret room has to be changed frequently to keep the customers. Take those young men for example, it wasn't their first time here. They came here before the accident. There were 6 of them. Wait a minute. You're saying that when they played Sobbing House, it wasn't their first time here? Hellion Vivian's eyes suddenly flashed, full of sharpness. Yes. Is there a problem? The shop owner looked at Hellion Vivian in confusion. The others also didn't understand why Hellion Vivian had such a reaction. After all, they really couldn't guess what Hellion Vivian was thinking. Hellion Weiwei looked at the steel pipes again, and a shocking thought popped up in her mind. When did the Sobbing House come out? Did they come to play not long after it came out? How do you know? The shop owner looked at Hellion Vivian in surprise. In fact, before Sobbing House came out, I received a call from them, but I don't remember who it was. It sounded like a boy and he asked me when the new content of the secret room would come out this time. Strangely, the new secret room was not announced on the internet. At that time I was wondering how this young man knew. Hellion Vivian's eyes flashed brighter. You're saying that he knew in advance that Sobbing House was going to be made? Yes, don't you think it's strange? The shop owner was still shaking his head. Hellion Vivian grasped the most fatal point. The person who knew in advance that Sobbing House was going to be made was the murderer. She was still wavering between the two boys. If this decisive evidence came out, everything would be easy to solve. But since there was no announcement, how did the murderer know about the contents of Sobbing House? Hellion Vivian's mind replayed the recording when they entered the secret room. The password to unlock every room, every recording of the story, and even every setting were related to Dong Sichuan's death. If the murder scene reflected the murderer's deepest desires, then wasn't this too much of a coincidence? Hellion Vivian suddenly paused and turned to look at the shop owner. You just said that the game here wasn't set up by you. Then how did Sobbing House's secret room come out? The shop owner tilted his head and thought, I remember that I posted a post in the online shop asking for questions. On the one hand, I wanted the shop to become more popular. On the other hand, I had a general idea of how to develop the secret room. Because the shop's business had always been very good, I would directly give rewards to the participants who provided the ideas. The rewards weren't much, ranging from 1,000 yuan to 200 yuan, but you didn't expect that there would be a perfect plan for the secret room. Hellion Vivian interrupted the shop owner's words very clearly. This plan not only provided the ideas, but it even made all the game content, including the background story, the recording prompts, and how to set up the mechanisms. All of this gave off a terrifying and mysterious atmosphere. It was simply in line with the secret room in your heart, so you directly adopted the plan provided by the other party. The shop owner was completely shocked. He really didn't expect that the other party even knew about this. Master, did you calculate all of this? Hellion Vivian smiled and didn't answer the shop owner's question. Instead, she asked another question. Have you seen the person who provided the plan? No, the plan he provided was too perfect. Even the mechanism operation and the prompts given by the walkie-talkie were in the plan. The construction was also very easy. I did say that I would treat him to a meal, but ever since he gave me the plan for the secret room, I couldn't send a message to his mailbox. I didn't even know where to transfer the money. The shop owner shook his head regretfully, but I can see that this is a veteran escape room enthusiast. His thinking is really meticulous. He even knows how to set up the mechanisms and even has a detailed production plan. It's simply amazing. Hellion Vivian smiled again, the corners of her mouth curling into a faint playful smile. I think I know who the murderer is. Murder? The shop owner didn't understand. What murderer? Hellion Vivian looked at him. Shop owner, Zhang Heng's death in your shop wasn't an accident. It was a long-planned conspiracy. Chapter 1061. The shopkeeper was stunned once again. This time even his head was buzzing. Who is it? Who is the murderer? Gutingting's voice was sharp. Right now she really didn't have an ounce of rationality to speak of. Hellion Vivian didn't know how to communicate with this kind of person, so she simply didn't say anything. She only said to the shop owner, Can you still find this email in your mailbox? This is fine. I've been keeping it. I haven't deleted it. The shop owner said as he turned on his computer. But the other party didn't use a QQ email. When we first communicated, he said that he was overseas. After that, he didn't reply to any of my messages. Here, look, these are the records I sent him. I wanted to transfer money to him, but I don't know if it's because he's overseas, but he changed his email so I can't contact him at all. Hellion Vivian still had a faint smile on her face. This person isn't overseas at all. That's just a lie he made up. Huh? The shop owner's eyes widened again. Hellion Vivian held her phone and clicked on the computer screen. A photo appeared on Hellion Vivian's phone just like that. What are you doing? Why would she take a photo at a time like this? Hellion Vivian lowered her eyes and opened the chat window on WeChat. Monkey, help me check the email address in this photo. I can't find anything. The shop owner waved his hand. I have a lot of friends online. They only found that this email address was indeed registered in China, but they couldn't find anything else. Hellion Vivian smiled faintly and didn't say anything. Only one person clenched her fists tightly at this moment. Gutingting was also very anxious. Compared to these unimportant things, can you tell us first? You just said that you already know the murderer. Who exactly is he? Zhao Xiaodong. Hellion Vivian's voice was very faint, as if she didn't mean to. Gutingting was stunned. Xiao Jingtian also didn't expect this to be the result. She first glanced at Qin Feiyang before her gaze landed on Zhao Xiaodong. Qin Feiyang was also surprised. He thought that this high school student in front of him, who had a wild imagination and was pretending to be mysterious, would identify him as the murderer. Not a single person thought so. As a result, Zhao Xiaodong's expression went blank at that moment. Then he pointed at himself and said, "Me? Miss Hellion, are you sure you didn't point to the wrong person?" Hellion Wei Wei's smile deepened. "You're not bad at acting and you're smart enough. You're also very meticulous in your thinking and you don't panic when you kill people. It's a pity that you have eyes but fail to see falling for a girl like that. Student Zhao Xiaodong, your ability to distinguish between women is really not that great. That's why you revealed so many clues, allowing me to follow along and link them together. Should I thank Dong Sikun?" Zhao Xiaodong's face was red as if he was very angry. He was very unwilling. "I don't understand what you are saying at all. I haven't said a single word from the beginning to the end. How can you be so sure that I'm the murderer? Didn't you say something in the end?" Hellion Vivian looked up and glanced at him coldly. "Weren't you the one who reminded us that we could see the rooftop through the window?" Zhao Xiaodong snorted and was a little puzzled. "You're saying that I'm the murderer just because of that?" "I just saw that sentence and analyzed the answer. What's wrong with that?" "I'm not saying that you're the murderer just because of that." Hellion Weiwei smiled. "I'm the kind of person who likes to study a person's psychology through words and actions. To be honest with you, from the very beginning, you were the person I suspected the most. When the wooden cabinet was pulled open, you were the last one to come out, followed by Zhang Heng's death. All the logic in solving a case is basically to find the problem from the person closest to the crime scene. I thought that after arriving at the crime scene, I would find some traces of your crime in the wooden cabinet. Unfortunately, it's been half a year and some of the traces have long disappeared. Moreover, this place has been searched by the police, so I also suspected that my initial judgment might have missed something. Also, Qin Feiyang seems to like Dong Sikun too much, so I never ruled him out as a suspect. I was never sure who the murderer was between the two of you, but I did a careful analysis. Qin Feiyang's performance in school was not bad, and his looks were outstanding. As long as he graduated, he would be recognized by countless companies. Furthermore, Xiao Jingtian likes him, so his future path in life can be said to be smooth sailing. So there's no need for him to ruin his future for Dong Sikun. To be frank, if we hadn't mentioned this person today, he wouldn't have felt the slightest bit of guilt. Qin Feiyang's voice was very deep. "I never said that I liked Sikun. The person I like has always been Jingtian. It hasn't changed since high school. But you really enjoy being pursued by her, don't you?" Hellion Vivian sneered. "Otherwise, you wouldn't have helped her with some things. To put it bluntly, you want everything. Nothing will happen between you and Dong Sikun now, but who can guarantee that in the future? You say that you like Miss Xiao, but most of the time when faced with a choice between two people, you will choose Dong Sikun. This is also why it's so painful. Mr. Qin, to be honest, you're really the worst man I've ever met." When Guo Tingting found out that the murderer wasn't Qin Feiyang, her attitude instantly changed. "Aren't you going a little too far by saying that about Feiyang? Feiyang has always been very warm and everyone knows this." Hellion Vivian glanced at Guo Tingting but didn't say anything, because she was afraid that Guo Tingting would beat her up. She really couldn't communicate with some girls. Were their brains made of tofu? How did they get into graduate school? On the other side, Hellion Vivian was still narrowing her eyes, preparing for a fight. His Highness, who had been silent all this time, curled his thin lips into a faint smile and his eyes were cold. Could it be that this young lady doesn't know the definition of the term warm man? It's actually very simple. A warm man is equivalent to a green tea bitch among women. Just now you seem to be saying that these men are very stupid and can't see through the nature of cheap women. In my opinion, you're not much better. You also can't see through the nature of a warm man, right? Guo Tingting was completely speechless, and all the words she wanted to say were stuck in her throat. This feeling of being stuck between a rock and a hard place was really unbearable. Hellion Vivian was a little stunned. Although it wasn't very nice, she really wanted to laugh. Chapter 1062. The corners of the man's lips curled up lovingly. Was she that happy? Of course Hellion Vivian was happy. She knew that His Highness had always been mean to her. He rarely said that to others. It was rare to see him, so she was in a good mood. Beligaju looked at her thin lips curled up slightly. He wanted to reach out and pull her into his arms like before. The moment he raised his fingers, he remembered something. A cold light suddenly flashed in his deep eyes. That order was still not rescinded. Hellion Vivian blinked. She thought that the murderous aura from the man was directed at Enchanting, so she quickly stood in front of His Highness. It was fine to be mean but never kill someone. It was troublesome to explain. Although this girl didn't think much of men and was a little stupid, she was only showing her personality at her age. Let's not deviate from the topic. Hellion Vivian's voice returned to normal. She glanced at Enchanting, who was blushing. At this time we're talking about the murderer. I don't care about what kind of person Mr. Chen is. I'm just saying my analysis. Zhao Xiaodong took advantage of the loophole and pushed his glasses up with a sneer. In other words, you're certain that I'm the murderer based on your illusory analysis? Little girl, you've been pretending to be mysterious from the beginning. I admit that you're indeed smarter and you're faster at playing the secret room, but you can't say that a person is a murderer with just a few words. I can sue you for slandering my reputation. Mr. Zhao, I advise you not to talk about the law with me. Hellion Vivian, who had fought countless lawsuits in the United States, took a step forward. Also, I've never pretended to be mysterious. Now that you're saying this, I can sue you for the same crime. Didn't you want to talk about something more substantial? You liked Dong Sikun so much so that you were willing to do anything for her. At first you didn't want to kill them but instead followed each and every one of them. Gradually you discovered many things that you didn't know. For example, Enchanting had clearly seen everything that happened on the rooftop that night, but she didn't tell the police anything. Another example was Zhang Heng, who had been intimate with Dong Sikun. At that time, you felt that the goddess in your heart who couldn't be sullied had jumped off the building because she couldn't stand being forced by Zhang Heng. You viewed everyone as Dong Sichuan's murderer. Even though there were many loopholes and contradictions in your investigation, you weren't willing to believe that the innocent girl wasn't what you imagined her to be. Before I came here, I had someone investigate the interactions between each of you and Dong Sikun. It's very strange. You're a person who doesn't have a job yet, but you're so willing to spend money on Dong Sikun. When she wanted an iPhone, you helped someone write a thesis and bought it for her. After you gave it to her, you felt especially satisfied. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to invade your privacy. But you should have a habit of posting things on your WeChat moments. I took a quick look at it. As Hellion Vivian spoke, she unlocked her phone and opened a few pictures. These were sent to me by someone who investigated you. There's a screenshot of your WeChat moments. It's about Dong Sikun a few days ago. You posted it on your WeChat moments. You gave her the 5S. Although she didn't accept your pursuit, she didn't reject your goodwill either. You felt that you still had hope, so you encouraged yourself. There's also a comment from Zhang Heng below. He wrote it very clearly. He asked if you were stupid. Why did you have to give your hard-earned money to a bitch? You gave her whatever she wanted with both hands. He also said that you'd be a second-class cripple for the rest of your life. You're short and ugly, so you should save it. That woman doesn't even like you. You even made up the story that the walkie-talkie killed people. Even the police won't believe you, let alone go to court. It seems that student Zhao is so arrogant because you're sure that I can't find out how you killed people. Hellion Vivian laughed. You're right. When I entered the locked room, I didn't find any clues to activate the switch. It's because the murder scene is too clean. Even if it's a locked room murder, there must be an auxiliary tool to complete it. I've been thinking about what this auxiliary tool is until the store manager mentioned that the person who provided this plan not only clearly wrote down the mechanism, but also set up the walkie-talkie. Under normal circumstances, one only needs to set up the light cards of each room. The hints will be given to everyone after the locked room is completed. In other words, the walkie-talkie should have been set up by the store manager, but this time it's very unusual. And the person who played the escape room twice with the walkie-talkie was you. Zhao Xiaodong laughed. You're really careful. You're just saying whatever comes to your mind. I just like to play the escape room with the walkie-talkie and you're saying that I'm a murderer? Is there any logic to it? What is the necessary connection between these two things? I'm speechless. It's indeed not that logical to just play with the walkie-talkie. Hellion Vivian laughed. She lowered her eyes and turned on her phone. There was a video on the screen and the content was a document that had been sent. The name of the document was clearly written with two big words: Sobbing House. What if you were the one who provided this escape room plan in the first place? Wouldn't you be able to confirm your suspicion of murder then? Hearing this, Zhao Xiaodong's back suddenly trembled, and panic appeared on his ordinary face for the first time. Hellion Vivian smiled wickedly. Come monkey, let student Zhao see where you guys are right now. Monkey quickly flashed out. The image on the phone not only made Zhao Xiaodong's face turn pale. Even the other three people widened their eyes in disbelief. That was their school's male dormitory. And it was specially used for graduate students to live in. Why would the person the other party sent out be in their school's male dormitory? Guo Tingting and Xiao Jingtian looked at each other. They didn't understand what was going on at all. Behind Monkey, there was a handsome young man in a leather jacket with a cold expression on his face. A screeching sound came from the phone. Hey boss, can you hear me? Fuck, why is the signal so bad? Let me tell you, you don't know how dangerous it was just now. I almost pointed a gun at someone, but fortunately I stopped him. And old A and the others, all of them are dressed like they're trying to collect protection fees, but they still insist that they're university students. They're so stupid. Chapter 1064. Hellion Vivian listened to the commotion as if the wall was about to be torn down. She held her forehead with her fingertips and sneered. Monkey, get to the point. The rest of you, if you don't keep quiet, you're not allowed to hug Qingchen anymore. When the rugged men with explosive destructive power heard this, they instantly straightened their backs and stood in line. Getting the little boss's favor was the goal they had been pursuing all their lives. Without the little boss around for the past 2 days, they felt like they had nothing left to live for. They couldn't hug her in the future. Just thinking about that scene made them feel so sad and cruel. Hellion Vivian was already used to the behavior of her silly subordinates. The corners of her mouth twitched and she didn't look at the rugged faces of the rugged men. She said to Monkey, "The documents are 100% restored?" "Of course." Monkey gave a thumbs up. It would be troublesome to track him down. After all, so much time has passed and it's hard to track him down. Fortunately, boss said that she would come to this school to look for him. At least it saved me 3 days and 3 nights of tracking. As long as his laptop hasn't been changed, I can find him by following the traces. This kid is quite smart. He knows to clear the documents at a fixed time. I used the recovery recycle bin to retrieve the previous documents. Took some time, but everything went smoothly. Very good. Hellion Vivian's thin lips curled. Point your phone at his computer screen. I want him to see it with his own eyes. Monkey naturally did as she said. Zhao Xiaodong looked at the page that he couldn't be more familiar with. The expression on his face couldn't be maintained anymore. Hellion Vivian's voice was still smiling, like a death god coming to claim his life. Student Zhao, you shouldn't be unfamiliar with this chat screen, right? To prevent you from trying to get away with your glib tongue, I asked them to restore the email you used to submit your submission to the store manager. There was only one sent document. Did you think that I wouldn't be able to find you just because you didn't leave your personal information when you registered? Student Zhao, you underestimate me, on my OG who only knows how to play tricks. Zhao Xiaodong still didn't speak. His entire face was ashen. The store manager's reaction was very big. He pointed at Vivian's phone screen and exclaimed, "It's this email. This is the email address that sent me the Sobbing House's secret room plan." Student Zhao. Hellion Vivian put away her phone. Her actions were handsome and her words were concise. She went straight to the point. If this plan of yours is handed over to the police to ask professionals to study it, they will immediately analyze the flaws in it. Why those unnecessary steel pipes appeared in this plan, And what function the walkie-talkies played, they will know with a simple investigation. As for you, don't even think about escaping this calamity. Hearing this, Zhao Xiaodong laughed softly. Then he took off his glasses and the fierceness on his face was obvious. I really don't understand. My plan was so perfect. How did you find out about these things? Shouldn't you suspect Qin Feiyong the most? He's clearly more qualified to be a murderer than I am. Because of all the background story and props in the secret room, everything you did was related to your heart. You restored everything that happened back then. Since then I've been thinking, how could the content of a secret room be as high as 90% similar to your experience? Unless there's something I don't know about, so when I reached the 3rd level, I had already sent someone to your school to wait. As expected, it was very rewarding. Fortunately, the store manager didn't forget the origin of this secret room plan. Hellion Vivian stretched and said in a very calm voice, "Okay, it's over. I've also found the evidence you've been thinking about. Student Zhao, go to jail obediently." Of course, Zhao Xiaodong wouldn't give in so easily. His first reaction was to run. Who would have thought that as soon as he turned around, something would fly over from behind and stab him in the back of his leg? Zhao Xiaodong immediately crawled on the ground in pain. He hugged his leg and looked to the side. It was a young man in a black suit. Speaking of this, he felt that it was inconceivable. The mechanism he had set up would definitely kill someone. Those steel pipes would definitely kill someone. Why wasn't the other party injured at all? He had originally thought that one more person dying would be able to divert everyone's attention. He hadn't expected that he would fail. Zhao Xiaodong grimaced as he looked up at Beligaju. This was undoubtedly the biggest failure of his plan. And that high school student. Zhao Xiaodong turned his head and looked at Hellion Vivian, his face extremely pale. Hellion Vivian didn't even look at him as she walked past him. Wait a minute. Zhao Xiaodong endured the piercing pain in his body, his lips trembling. Since you're so capable and can find out everything, and you said that I wrongly avenged Sikhan and that Zhang Heng wasn't the one who killed her, then who is the murderer? And who is the murderer? Hellion Vivian glanced to the side without a trace of warmth. Why should I tell you? You know who that person is, don't you? Zhao Xiaodong became agitated. Help me find that person. Hellion Vivian stopped in her tracks and said in a calm voice, I've always thought that no matter what kind of love in this world, at the very least, it requires equality. You like her and she respects you. It's not a pity that a woman like Dong Sikhan died. In a relationship, many people break up for various reasons, but it doesn't matter. The most disgusting thing is a woman who interferes in other people's families and plays with other people's feelings. She's no longer around because the heavens have eyes. She treated you so badly, yet you still want to avenge her. Should I say that you're a scumbag who deserves a scumbag? Student Zhao, when you have time, think about your parents. How did they treat you? Is it worth ruining your entire life for such a woman? Zhao Xiaodong didn't say anything else. He was suddenly stunned. At that moment, the only image that appeared in his mind was that his mother had come to Beijing and couldn't bear to go to Starbucks. She had said, "Son, one drink costs more than 30 yuan. That's too expensive. I won't drink it. Mom will buy it for you. What do you want to drink?" He came from a small town and his parents were very ordinary workers. There was no coffee shop like Starbucks in their county. His mother really couldn't bear to part with it, but no matter how reluctant she was, she still ordered him a cup of iced cappuccino on such a hot day. At that time he thought that she was embarrassing because she didn't even know how to order coffee. Of course it was embarrassing. To them, and especially to Dong Sikhan, Starbucks was nothing more than an ordinary thing. Chapter 1065. His mother, on the other hand, was like a country bumpkin. She wore ordinary clothes and even seemed a little old-fashioned. She didn't even know how to take the subway. Her voice was unusually loud, as if she was always afraid that he would get lost. He couldn't help but flare up at her when he saw how timid she was. He picked up a cup of coffee and threw it at her. His mother was a little dumbfounded, as if she had been frightened by his sudden anger. At that time he told himself in his heart that he must never let anyone else in school know that his mother was like this. Because that would be too embarrassing. He didn't want Dong Sikhan to look down on him because of this. At that time his mother really wanted to go to his school to take a look. She even said that she wanted to treat him and his close friends to a meal. How could he agree? He didn't care if there were seats available at that time. He bought a train ticket at the last minute and told her to hurry back. That day he threw a tantrum from beginning to end. He clearly knew that she didn't know how to take the subway, but he didn't even send her off because he was in a hurry to buy an iPhone for Dong Sikun. Later he didn't know how his mother got to the train station. But at that time when he received a call she was still smiling on the other end of the phone. She told him not to worry about his family and to focus on his studies. If he didn't have enough money to spend he could ask her for more. She also said that he could eat whatever he wanted and not treat himself badly. She also said that he shouldn't be greedy when sleeping and that he should cover himself with a blanket. At that time he only felt impatient and said, "I'm not a 3-year-old child. I know all this. How troublesome." Then he hung up the phone. Later he found out from his father that because his mother didn't know how to get to the train station, she was stuck in traffic and didn't manage to catch the train that night. She spent the night at the station and only bought a new ticket the next day to go home. Zhao Xiaodong didn't know why, but he only remembered these details now. Every scene was so clear in his mind. She clearly couldn't bear to part with it. But she was willing to do anything for him. He couldn't imagine how his mother, who was unfamiliar with this place, could curl up at the train station for an entire night. Just for the rest of the 200 yuan rest fee. However, he had spent more than 6,000 yuan on an Apple phone for a woman who had called him a harpy. Among them, 3,000 yuan was specially sent to him by his mother, Zhao Xiaodong's words. He couldn't describe how he felt. His throat and on the other hand felt like he was being burned by a blazing fire. It was so painful that all that was left of him was ashes. Then he began to cry. He buried his face in his arms and bawled like a child. Hellion Vivian put away the prayer beads and did not look at him again. Most of the time we forget. In this world, there will always be someone who looks at us without asking for anything in return. Unfortunately, the older he grew, the more selfish he became. Zhao Xiaodong finally understood this principle. When his mother didn't know how to do those things, did she also feel bad in her heart? However, as someone who knew everything, he didn't teach her. Instead, he felt that she was an embarrassment. Sometimes the older your parents get, the more they remind you to pay attention to these and that. Actually, it's because she misses you. Why is it that when we were young, everything was taught by our parents? But when we grow up, we put them at the bottom of the list because of many things. Police cars roared from the long alley. They took Zhao Xiaodong and a few others away. After all, someone had called the police, so they had to make a statement. Under normal circumstances, the murderer would defend himself. They didn't expect Zhao Xiaodong to be so quiet, except for being blunt about his crime. He only said one sentence to the police. "Can you not tell my mother that I like that kind of woman?" The police were stunned. "Okay. Thank you." After Zhao Xiaodong said this, he didn't speak again. The rest of the people had already recorded their statements. Hellion Vivian was the most familiar with this process, so she finished writing in 2 or 3 sentences. When she brought Beligaju out of the interrogation, only Gutingting was outside. She looked like she was waiting for Qin Feiyang and she was very infatuated. When she saw Hellion Vivian and the others walking over, there was a hint of hesitation on her face. She asked Hellion Vivian tentatively, "I heard what you said to Zhao Xiaodong. You said that there were 2 murderers among us. One killed Zhang Heng and the other killed Dong Sikun. Now there's another murder. Who is that person? Who do you think it is?" Hellion Vivian smiled faintly and asked in return, "Didn't you see that person's shadow that day?" Gutingting's expression changed and she said vaguely, I didn't see it very clearly. Actually, besides you, there's another window that can see everything on the rooftop." Hellion Vivian's voice was very calm. "Your dormitory building is not far from the rooftop. As for who it is, I won't say much if I don't have evidence. Besides, I only accepted this case. The rest of the investigation is the police's business. It has nothing to do with me." When Gutingting heard this, she shouted, "Oh my God, do you still want to hide something like this? If you know who the murderer is, don't you feel guilty if you don't report it?" "I said I don't have evidence." Hellion Vivian looked at her and laughed. "Besides, Miss Tingting, I know very well what you want to see in order to get Qin Feiyang. I'm not a peacemaker. The investigation is left to the police. I only take what I want. I don't like Dong Sikun, and I don't have the obligation to help her find out who the murderer is. In that case, Miss Tingting doesn't seem to have the right to criticize me at all. When you saw the situation on the rooftop, you didn't tell the police. Did you think that you could only get Chen Feiyang after Dong Sikhun left? Gu Tingting's face froze. I must be crazy to say such things to a cold-blooded and dark high school student like you. After saying this, Gu Tingting walked in the opposite direction. Her hurried footsteps made it seem as if Hellion Vivian was a demon who had committed a heinous crime. Huh. Hellion Vivian chuckled softly. Just as His Highness had said, sometimes people were really dirty from head to toe. She had double standards of morality and always stood on the high ground to demand things from others. Her own actions were excusable, but the actions of others were cold-blooded and dark. It was really funny. Mississippi's Hellion Weiwei followed the voice and turned around. She saw Xiao Jingtian, who had just walked out of the interrogation room, standing behind her. Her eyes were filled with emotions as she said, "I have something to say to you." Hellion Vivian nodded and found a wooden bench to sit down. However, Xiao Jingtian didn't sit down. Instead, she stood to the side and only spoke after a while. "Actually, you already know who the other murderer is, right?" Chapter 1066. Hellion Vivian looked at her and slowly smiled. "That's right. I already know the identity of the other murderer." "Then why didn't you tell the police just now?" Xiao Jingtian clenched her hands and lowered her eyes a little. Hellion Vivian looked up at the clouds floating in the sky. "Because I think it's better for the murderer to turn herself in. After all, the probability of accidentally pushing someone down is more than 90%. It's not like it was intentional murder." Xiao Jingtian was stunned. She suddenly looked up at Hellion Vivian. Her eyes were as clear as water. She could see through everything, but she didn't say anything. Xiao Jingtian knew that the other party was being lenient. Some words didn't need to be said. Xiao Jingtian also sat down. After a while, she said in a low voice, "Thank you for this." "You're welcome. It's our shop's mission to serve our customers. As long as Miss Xiao remembers to transfer the money that hasn't been paid to my Alipay account, and if you have time, leave a good review for my Taobao shop, it would be perfect." Hellion Weiwei stood up and put her hands into her pockets. Her posture was very cool as she casually stretched. Her eyes looked at a certain highness who was standing not far away. "I still have something to do tonight, so I'll be leaving first." Getting a certain highness drunk was the most important goal in life at this stage of her life. Xiao Jingtian also noticed Hellion Vivian's gaze. A gentle smile appeared on her face. "You two really love each other. I didn't expect you to have such a deep relationship at such a young age. It's very enviable. It's just that when it comes to relationships, there are too many uncertainties." At this point, Xiao Jingtian lowered her head and looked at her hands. She lowered her voice and said, "The more you love each other, the more painful it will be when they betray each other. Love is just a product of hormones. It's just a trick to make people happy for a moment." Hellion Vivian turned her head and looked at her. It was almost dusk. The golden sunlight shone down and inlaid a thin layer of light on Xiao Jingtian's long black hair. She was crying, although there was no sound. However, big drops of tears fell onto the back of his hand. She didn't have time to wipe them away. Only his hands were clenched tightly and his shoulders were trembling. Hellion Vivian paused for a moment, took his hand out of his trouser pocket and pressed her head. "Your mother still needs you to take care of her. Don't cry all the time." Xiao Jingtian paused and said in a hoarse voice, "My mother has been with him for most of her life, but he wants to divorce my mother for the sake of a young girl. He wants my mother to leave with nothing. My mother can't bear to part with me and she can't bear to part with this family, so she has always been hesitant." Hellion Vivian didn't say anything. She just listened quietly. Xiao Jingtian's hands clenched even more tightly, and she even sounded a little fierce. But that woman was really insatiable. She thought that my mother wouldn't divorce him, so she kept sending messages to my mother to show off how much she was doted on. I didn't know anything. I only thought about my own matters. I didn't know that my mother slept very late every night. I didn't know that she was in a state where she couldn't sleep without medication. I didn't know how much pain she was in. Do you understand? My mother and the others were different from us at that age. We were still young, so we could accept all the betrayals and start all over again. My mother and the others couldn't. One day, she called me in a panic and said that she suspected that my father was having an affair. I said that she only knew how to let her imagination run wild. She didn't know how helpless she was when she called. I think that at that time she just wanted someone to accompany her to deal with this matter. Also, the chains had to be made of black ice iron. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to suppress His Highness's demonic nature. However, in his current state he shouldn't be so difficult to deal with. He would definitely be especially cute when drunk. Hellion Vivian looked at Beligaju, who was standing under the swaying shadow of the tree in a black suit. She smiled happily and was about to walk over as if nothing had happened. Chapter 1067. Swoosh. 3 very flashy sports cars rushed over from the other side of the road. With a nimble and beautiful turn, with a screech, the car came to a sudden stop in front of Wei Wei. But the car door opened. The first to show his head was the elegant K. It was a very exaggerated outfit. Hellion Vivian didn't want to look at it. A group of rough men came out. Fuck. Can you guys stop squeezing? Monkey stretched out his hands and flapped them vigorously in the sports car. That scene was really full of jokes. Many people at the entrance of the police station were already looking over. However, they were all wearing black shirts. When they saw Hellion Vivian, they called out in unison, "Boss?" Their facial expressions were especially vicious. Each of them looked like a big shot in the underworld. It made the police stare at them like they were thieves. They hesitated whether to arrest the female high school student again and interrogate her. Was she a second-generation gangster? The most people in Beijing were the second generation of officials. Which family was so powerful to have a second-generation gangster and a woman at that? The police stopped moving and stood there vigilantly. As a sniper who was very sensitive to sight, young Al wanted to shoot at the people who were looking at him again. Fortunately, he was stopped by Monkey. "You can't. Hero. You can't make a move here." Hellion Vivian. Why did Monkey start to talk about ancient Chinese after not seeing him for a few days? Did he read too much classical Chinese? It had been a long time since she had a headache. Compared to the commotion on their side, the person who got out of the other extended Rolls-Royce was very elegant. It was Special Assistant Long, whom she hadn't seen in a long time. He was dressed in a white suit and his entire person was filled with wisdom. "Wang Fei, you look younger and younger. Where is the king? Is he still there?" This was the normal style. Why was it that they were both subordinates, but when she showed them, they were rough men who collected protection fees? On a certain prince's side, they were all elite nobles. Sigh. Hellion Vivian let out a long sigh. Special Assistant Long thought that something had happened. "Princess, did something happen to the king?" "He's fine." Hellion Vivian pointed to the opposite side. "Where's he?" "Forget it. You won't understand my sadness." Azure Dragon really didn't understand. But when he saw the figure that had shrunk by a third, his eyes shook. "King Yu," Beligaju glanced at him leisurely. His gaze was the same as before, indifferent and emotionless, but it made people feel an unprecedented sense of oppression. This was because the demonic nature in his body had reached its peak. The Azure Dragon silently closed his mouth, wondering why the king had revealed this form. He was secretly pulled aside by Hellion Vivian. "Azure Dragon, how much do you know about His Highness alcohol tolerance?" Fortunately, it was the Azure Dragon. If it was the Fire Qilin, it would have cried out in surprise. Azure Dragon was relatively calm. After a moment of confusion, he replied in a low voice, "I'm not sure about His Majesty's alcohol tolerance, but after coming here, His Majesty likes to drink red wine, especially Lafite." "I know this." Hellion Vivian chuckled softly as if she was planning something. "Actually, I almost had a conflict with His Highness." Hearing this, the Azure Dragon secretly glanced at his master and found that Beligaju was looking at him. He nodded his chin, which meant that the Azure Dragon should listen obediently. No wonder His Majesty was so cold today. It turned out that he had a quarrel with the princess. He should have thought of this long ago. No one could make His Majesty have such a clear feeling except for the princess. The Azure Dragon coughed softly. According to the hint given by Beligaju, he followed Hellion Vivian's words and said, "So, what does the princess want to do?" "I want to get him drunk." Hellion Vivian lowered her voice and said very seriously, "You should understand that in our modern world, under normal circumstances, the overbearing president will use this method to solve conflicts. The Azure Dragon, after coming to the modern world as an all-around special assistant, he watched a lot of TV series. But there was no female lead in TV series who was an overbearing president. Princess Consort, have you mixed up your own title?" The Azure Dragon didn't know about this kind of thing. Hellion Vivian didn't get it mixed up in a day or two. "So, do you have any good suggestions on how to get him drunk quickly?" Hellion Vivian was definitely discussing this problem with the Azure Dragon very seriously. "How can His Majesty?" The Azure Dragon was still smiling, but when he saw the deep eyes of his master not far away, he immediately changed his tone and spoke twice as fast. "Actually, it's very easy to get His Majesty drunk. Just mix the red wine with white wine and drink 3 glasses. He will definitely be drunk." Hellion Vivian's eyes lit up. "Mix it with wine? Why didn't I think of this method? Alright, the Azure Dragon, after this is done I will give you a raise." The Azure Dragon felt that it was necessary to remind the princess. "But His Majesty's demonic nature, don't worry. He has become smaller now and his demonic nature is not as strong as before. It's still within my control." Hellion Vivian thought of His Highness's cute behavior in the past 2 days. She had hugged him in her arms and slept earlier. It was Yu Lao's words that made her unable to ignore it. Moreover, for 2 whole days he didn't even touch her. Hellion Vivian clenched her fingers and ignored the dull pain rising in her chest. She had made up her mind to do this. At this moment, the Azure Dragon suddenly realized why His Majesty had turned into the form of a little devil. It turned out that he was digging a hole for the princess to jump into. The Azure Dragon didn't want to comment on his master's shamelessness anymore. However, the princess who came from Buddhism probably didn't know that the cuter a little devil was, the more dangerous it was. Because only the most perfect disguise was the most powerful moment of a devil. Hellion Vivian still didn't understand this situation. After all, whether it was Tian Dao or Buddhism, one would only shrink when one's magical power was lost. It was the same reason why she had become smaller. Therefore she thought that Beligaju would be like her. She even asked Monkey to get her a pair of good handcuffs. They were made of special materials and were specially used to deal with devils. "Boss, what do you want this for?" Monkey thought that she had encountered some evil spirit that was difficult to deal with. Hellion Vivian was very straightforward. "Isn't it a little tight to handcuff His Highness?" The rough men were speechless. Did they know something that they shouldn't know? He was indeed the boss. He could even think of such a way of playing. In other words, when the boss and Big Boss Jew were together, she was indeed the one who forced herself on Big Boss Jew. Hellion Vivian lowered her head and fiddled with the handcuffs. She didn't realize that the people around her had already misunderstood. She was thinking about what she should do tonight. "I do." Hellion Vivian happily took out a bottle of white wine from her backpack and smiled brightly. "Erguote. Although it's not as pure as Wuliangye, it's not bad." She was really a witty player. She guessed that there might not be white wine in the villa, so she bought a bottle at the convenience store before getting into the car. Seeing this, Beligaju raised his eyebrows and chuckled softly before saying, "I'll go get a glass." Go. Hellion Vivian suddenly felt that it was perfect. While a certain highness went out, she also checked the handcuffs that she had prepared to see if they were strong enough in her superb acting skills. Beligaju quickly came back with the things. The suit on his body didn't become disproportionate because of his shrinking. Instead, it reflected his youthful figure very carefully. The red wine was placed in a small silver bucket, giving a very luxurious feeling. The silver bucket was full of ice cubes used to ice the red wine. In this kind of weather, drinking dry red wine with a slightly cold taste couldn't be more enjoyable. Hellion Vivian reached out and took the wine glass that a certain highness had brought. After Beligaju's hands were free, he took a clean handkerchief with one hand and held the red wine bottle with one hand. He poured the wine into the wine glass with a standard posture. It was said that the temperature of the hand would affect the taste of the wine, so when pouring the wine one had to be careful. As long as the wine glass was gently shaken, the rich fragrance of the red wine would spread out from the mouth of the glass. Helene Vivian took a sip first, then reached out her white left hand and gently clinked the wine glass in Beligaju's hand. There was a crisp ding sound. Helene Vivian took advantage of the time when a certain highness was still drinking to reach out her right hand and support herself behind him. The two of them were very close to each other. Helene Vivian wanted to sneak up on a certain highness, but she didn't expect that the other party didn't look surprised at all. Although there was still a smile on his face, his eyes were a little indifferent. He just looked at her like he didn't want to touch her. He didn't reach out to hold her waist like he used to. This made Helene Vivian's whole body stiffen, and then she withdrew her hand uninterestedly. Sure enough, he didn't have much interest in her after she had grown up. Or was it because he had already raised her so he didn't find it fresh anymore? Helene Vivian narrowed her eyes and drank all the red wine in the glass in one gulp. Then she bit open the lid of the ergotu and looked at Beligaju with a faint smile. Do you want to drink it together? Okay. Beligaju put down the wine glass in his hand. There were too many profound meanings in his impeccable smile that Helene Vivian couldn't understand. She didn't know that when she leaned over. Beligaju's eyes were terrifyingly deep. His gaze fell on the delicate collarbone that was exposed because she raised her hand, and there was an unprecedented magic in his deep eyes. In the beginning, when he saw this little phoenix, he was stunned. She was wearing the most boring thick kasaya, and her stubborn expression wasn't very likable. Chapter 1069. At that time it was still snowing in Mountain Tenya. She was holding a snowball in her hand and wrapped up like a pure and innocent little bear. She just looked at him like that. There was obvious stubbornness in her pair of beautiful black eyes, and it was also very childish. After looking at him, she stepped on strange patterns in the snow and didn't speak to anyone. Otherwise, she would step on the footprints with all her might. Although that feeling was cute, it just made people feel uncomfortable. He had always liked gentle things, but she was different. She always did things that gave people a headache, including constantly throwing buns at him. However, that pair of clear eyes made it difficult for him to ignore. Therefore, every time she appeared, she would always be able to attract his attention at the first moment. In the entire Buddhist path, only she dared to not read the scriptures and play with snowballs over there. He originally planned to just raise her. Back then, he went to Yu Lao's place and wrapped her with a red string. The purpose was only to make her eyes only look at him. He especially wanted her clear eyes to be tainted with pain. That was what made it interesting, wasn't it? But later, when he held her in his arms, he didn't know why, but he was actually so satisfied. It was as if as long as she lay in his arms, nothing was so important. Therefore, he tolerated some of the Buddhist path's provocations. More and more time in his dreams, he no longer broke her hand, but pressed her hard on the bed and did some more excessive things. For example, kissing her hard, hugging her, making her happy, and even crying expression appear on her face, making her hug him and beg for mercy. This kind of dream was like a vine that wrapped around the tip of his heart. The more it wrapped, the tighter it became and the deeper he sank. The excuse of raising her was no longer valid. He thought that she wasn't that important. In fact, every time he heard that she went to water the Bodhi tree again, he couldn't wait to lock her up so that she couldn't go anywhere. Therefore, the feeling of not being able to touch her like now had already made Beligaju's tolerance to the extreme. Another drink? Helene Vivian narrowed her eyes and looked at him with a faint smile. Her voice was always pleasant after drinking, like a feather gently tickling the tip of one's heart. Her beautiful eyes had a layer of water vapor because of the alcohol. Her lips were slightly open, and her scattered hair hung down to cover her forehead. Her chestnut black hair seemed to have softened under the warm yellow light. Coupled with the lazy white shirt she was wearing, it only made people want to hug her fiercely. Beligaju's usually cold eyes gradually showed a trace of madness that had never appeared before. However, Helene Vivian, who was determined to get him drunk, did not notice this. She only cared about whether the wine in his glass decreased or not. Azure Dragon had told her to drink 3 cups. As long as he drank 3 cups, a certain highness would collapse. Why hadn't he done anything yet? Beligaju swirled the goblet in his hand. Although his current form was smaller, His movements were still as elegant as before. When he was about to drink the second cup, he reached out his hand and gently supported his forehead with his slender fingers. He looked like he was about to get drunk. Hellion Vivian saw this situation and calmly took a sip of red wine. Do you feel uncomfortable? It's okay. The two of them were sitting on the sofa, and beside them was a large floor-to-ceiling window. Beligaju sat like this, and his posture became a little more languid. He slowly lowered his head and pressed his fingers on his temples again. His long and narrow eyes closed. His thick eyelashes cast a beautiful shadow on his face. Hellion Vivian's eyes lit up. She thought to herself that it was finally working. She smiled and began to pour a third cup of wine for a certain highness. Then she realized that her overjoyed expression was too obvious. She instantly returned to a concerned tone. Since you're not feeling well, drink this cup and go to bed early. Hellion Vivian felt that what she did this time was perfect. After all, a certain highness listened to her and said okay to her with a chuckle. She didn't know that her cunning fox appearance had long been captured by Bailey Jiaju's eyes. The taste of red wine mixed with white wine was indeed very strong, especially when it was drunk in one gulp. Hellion Vivian smacked her lips and looked in Beligaju's direction. At first she wasn't sure if a certain highness was drunk, until Beligaju stood up and swayed. He still had a perfect smile on his face, but his footsteps were a little unsteady. Hellion Vivian finally believed Azure Dragon's words. She stood up and pressed the man down on the soft sofa. Although the sofa was single, it was very big. Therefore, Hellion Vivian's actions didn't affect anything. She didn't give the man a chance to react. Then there was a click. Cold handcuffs locked his right hand and handcuffed him to the sofa. Beligaju didn't expect to use a prop like handcuffs. He raised his eyebrows and looked at Hellion Vivian with a deep gaze. What are you doing? Don't look at me like that. Hellion Wei Wei felt the need to defend herself. It's all because you've been too abnormal these past 2 days. That's why I'm doing this. At this point she paused very seriously, then said, Don't worry, I'm not going to sleep with you. Beligaju had a smile on his face, but his eyes turned cold when he heard the last sentence. He thought that she was going through so much trouble to do something to him. This result was very different from what he had expected. It was still not enough. Just doing this was still not enough. Hellion Vivian also realized the coldness emanating from the man. Her guess had been confirmed. Her heart felt like it had been stung by something and the pain was obvious. She pressed him down and gripped his wrist tightly, but her voice lowered. If you want to separate now, it's fine. Separate? Beligaju was shocked. He didn't expect her to say such a thing. Other than the anger of being offended, there was something else rolling in his eyes. What did you say? Hellion Vivian clenched the flesh on her palm. After so many years of being together, she even felt like she was connected to him by flesh and blood. She didn't want to separate, but there was no other way. Some things were ambiguous to begin with. I said it's fine if you want to separate now. Hellion Vivian looked at him. I heard your conversation with you Lao that day. Actually, you already knew a way to make me grow up, but you never thought of telling me, right? Beligaju didn't deny it. And this silence made Hellion Vivian's heart sink. What you want more is a little phoenix that is completely raised by you. When you first approached me, this was what you were thinking, right? If that's the case, it's better to separate. She felt that since the misunderstanding was solved, it was not a big deal to lock a certain highness up like this. After all, a man who was not controlled was too dangerous. He would not let her hug him to sleep. This was the best situation. He was drunk, handcuffed, and his magic was weakened. No matter how she touched him, he would not resist. Hellion Vivian liked this setting very much. She leaned over and kissed him. Just lock me up. I can still hug you to sleep later. How do you plan to hug me to sleep? Beligaju raised his eyebrows playfully. Hellion Vivian reached out and pulled his ear. She felt that she had made the right decision today. It felt so good to the touch. Just hug me like this. Also, you don't have to struggle. With your current magic, you can't open these handcuffs. Oh. Beligaju smiled. It's so strong? Hellion Vivian was quite proud of this. I specially asked someone to make it with Shen Ice Iron. Shen Ice Iron specially used to subdue demons? Beligaju did not move. He looked down at the handcuffs on him and the corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. That's a good idea. Of course, who came up with the idea? Without guessing, Hellion Vivian was very happy. Her glassy eyes were like spring water and she looked very cunning. But you handcuffed me like this. Aren't you afraid that I'll be angry? Beligaju looked up at her. Half of his body was on the sofa and his suit was wrinkled. It always gave a sense of beauty that was finally broken. Hellion Vivian kissed him again. Anyway, no matter how angry you are, it will be the next day. Now you can do something to me like this, right? Are you still dizzy? I'll go make some pear soup for you to drink first. I'll come back and hug you to sleep later. After saying that, Hellion Wei Wei stood up and walked into the kitchen with her long legs, humming a little tune in her mouth. She cut the snow pear, added honey and prepared ice. After drinking wine in summer, it was always good to drink some pear soup. Beligaju looked at the busy figure in the kitchen with deep eyes. The smile on his face was evil and dangerous, which was in line with his current harmless appearance. The pear soup didn't take long to boil. After it was out of the pot, Hellion Vivian tasted it. It wasn't very sweet, so His Highness probably wouldn't hate it. Then she scooped it into a wine glass, added 3 ice cubes and brought it to Beligaju. Hellion Vivian looked at the handcuffs on him. It's not convenient for you to drink by yourself. I'll hold it for you to drink. After drinking we'll go to sleep. It seemed that she liked the fun of locking him up. Beligaju chuckled and drank a mouthful of pear soup. His obedient appearance made people's hearts itch. Hellion Vivian thought that she would be able to sleep with His Highness like this in a while, and her eyes were full of smugness. However, she soon realized a problem. Chapter 1071. Throughout the night, Hellion Vivian didn't know how many times he did it to her. In a daze, it seemed like it was almost dawn before he kissed her ankles and unlocked her handcuffs. Just like that, he carried her into the bathroom and the shirt hanging on her body seemed to have lost its use of force. He had always been careful with her as if she was a porcelain doll. Of course, other than in bed, when a certain highness was so fierce that it made people's legs go weak, most of the time when he looked at her he was always so gentle that he didn't look like a demon who killed without spilling blood. The water was very comfortable on her body. Hellion Vivian didn't open her eyes and just moved. Bailey Jiaju lowered his head and glanced at her. He reached out his hand to cover her restless long legs and helped her massage her waist. Just like that, he gently hugged her with one hand and used the other to pour water for her. He smiled and kissed her spotlessly white forehead. After washing up, he took out a white towel and wrapped it around her. Then he hugged Hellion Vivian again. He wanted to raise her. It had nothing to do with what form she was in. It was because she was her. However, those old men in the heavenly Tao were still as talkative as before. This was something that made him very unhappy. Beligaju narrowed his eyes. After placing Hellion Vivian on the bed, he called for one of his messengers. A black feather fluttered down. It was a letter written to Yu Lao. The content of the letter was very simple. It was only one sentence. If you still talk so much when you see Phoenix next time, I will beat your soul to pieces. The casual handwriting was just like its owner. It looked elegant, but in fact it was overbearing. When Yu Lao received this letter, he was still picking through his pile of red strings. When he saw the demon's messenger appear, he began to have a very ominous premonition. When he saw the handwriting on the letter, he decided not to return to Yu Lao's temple for a while. He was afraid that some great demon would really come to beat him up. Just like that, Yu Lao's temple was empty that day. Compared to the speed at which Yu Lao tied strings for others, he was still very fast when it came to escaping. The night faded and the morning light shone in through the window. Hellion Vivian was woken up by hunger. She smelled the smell of scrambled eggs with chopped green onions, which spread in the air and carried out a very wonderful fermentation. It was really very fragrant. Hellion Vivian hugged the blanket and sat down. Before she was fully awake, she walked out. In the open and spacious kitchen, the man was cooking porridge. He was also holding a book in his hand. The book had a few big words written on it, 12 breakfast flavors. He probably sensed Hellion Vivian walking over, so he turned the fire to the lowest setting before turning around to look at the person behind him. Helene Vivian's eyes were still closed. It was obvious that she hadn't slept enough. Her thick eyelashes cast a faint shadow and she was as lazy as a cat. Looking at Helene Wei like this, Bailey Jiaju's eyes softened. He walked toward her and carried her in his arms. His fingers gently stroked her hair and kissed the stray hairs on the top of her head. Sleep a little more? Other than Helene Vivian, His Highness had never been so patient with anyone. The demons hiding outside the villa finally heaved a sigh of relief. After all, they were very clear about their master's aura. Last night, when the Princess Consort said that they were going to separate, they were really afraid that their master would be unhappy and shatter them into powder. Then he would destroy the villa with his bare hands. Fortunately, the Princess Consort and their master had reconciled. Not to mention the sense of danger, even the roses outside the villa were more colorful than usual. Beligaju couldn't help but laugh and rubbed her head. Chinese food. There are steamed dumplings, chicken feet, pork ribs and rice porridge. You should like them. Cantonese morning tea. Helene Vivian looked at the table full of small steamers and couldn't take it all. She was obviously very happy. When did you learn how to make this? Chapter 1072. Beligaju's thin lips curled up as he picked up a piece of pork rib and put it into her mouth. I only made an egg with chopped green onions. The rest were all sent over by the hotel's chef. Upon hearing this, Helene Vivian fell silent. When ordinary people like them didn't know how to cook, they would at most order takeout. He was indeed an evil capitalist. Yesterday she actually didn't see through his essence because of his cute appearance and was suppressed just like that. Thinking about it, it was really a little stupid. It was all Yu Lao's fault for pulling down her average IQ. However, today's breakfast was still very delicious. After Helene Vivian finished eating the pork ribs, she specifically went to conquer the plate of fried eggs with chopped green onions that a certain highness had fried. The saltiness was just right and it was very fragrant. Beligaju knew that the woman in his arms liked to eat Cantonese snacks the most. However, she hadn't touched the chicken feet and rice noodle rolls today. She had been eating the dishes that he made. Her stomach was bulging from eating and she even asked if he had any. I'll make it for you tomorrow. Beligaju rubbed Helene Vivian's stomach for her. He used just the right amount of strength and even he didn't notice the doting look in his eyes. However, he still had to settle the score. My respected master, although we are together in life and death, if you dare to mention separation again in the future, I will definitely break your legs and break your claws. Beligaju said this sentence close to Helene Vivian's ear. His voice was very deep and low and it didn't seem like he was joking at all. Helene Vivian also knew that she had misunderstood this time, but she asked, is it still useful for me to drink the divine water now? She had to grow up eventually. My master. Beligaju reached out and pulled Helene Vivian's hand over. He lowered his eyes and kissed the back of her hand. You are the phoenix of Buddhism. No matter in the past or now, you rely on your invincible merit, don't you? When Helene Vivian heard this, she smiled handsomely. You're right. This way we can earn more money. Recently my Taobao shop's rating has increased. If I take in another evil spirit, my merit will be complete. Later, I'll look at the comments and see if there are any orders I can accept. Just as Helene Vivian finished speaking, there was a knock on the door. This villa was very big and it was located in the middle of the forest. Under normal circumstances, no one would come here. The housekeeper would often come in, but only with Beligaju's permission. Helene Vivian had never heard a doorbell like this since she moved into the villa. The villa was divided into 2 floors. The 2 of them were sitting in the living room downstairs, which was not far from the door. The person outside leaned against the wooden door and listened. When he saw that no one answered the door, he raised his hand and knocked a few more times. Strange, the address is clearly written here. The person held the envelope in his hand and looked at the villa in front of him that he had never entered before. He frowned in confusion. Did they all go out? They shouldn't be at work at this time, right? Such a big villa can't be without a servant, right? As he muttered, the wooden door in front of him opened. An extremely handsome face came into view. At that moment he wondered if he had seen a big star. Hello, this is your registered letter. the postman said loudly and handed the letter in his hand to the owner of the villa. Beligaju had been in modern times for so long, but he had never received a letter. This kind of thing that only appeared in ancient times, he did not expect to see it in the 21st century when information was so developed. What's wrong? Helene Vivian held a steamed bun in her mouth and put her arm on Beligaju's shoulder. She looked at the registered letter in his hand and then frowned. After all, in such an era very few people would use registered letters, unless there was a secret that they did not want others to know. Helene Vivian took the registered letter and tore it from the side. There was only one piece of paper inside. The paper was completely black and there was a line of words written in red script on it. First of all, thank you for reading this letter. My master is very interested in the business you are doing. Recently, the house has not been peaceful, so I invite you gentlemen to come here for a gathering. In addition to this sentence, there was a string of addresses behind it. Helene Vivian was very familiar with the address. It was one of the 8 alleys in the capital. It was very hidden and not many people knew about it. Helene Vivian raised her eyebrows and smiled playfully. Interesting. To be able to find them in such a way, it was obvious that the other party was not simple. The more complicated the person was, the higher the price. Helene Vivian liked this kind of person who did not lack money. After returning to the villa, Helene Vivian casually tidied up. She wore a simple black t-shirt and a pair of denim shorts. Outside, she wore a pure white sunscreen suit that was the same as Quan Jilong's. It hung straight to her knees and she looked very handsome in it. Helene Vivian did not let Beligaju drive. It was most convenient to ride a bike to such an old alley. Her long legs crossed over the BMW Tomahawk, and she let Beligaju sit behind the car. A certain highness liked this position very much. He reached out and hugged Helene Vivian's waist. It was not very far from the villa to the alley. The BMW Tomahawk was still very popular. Helene Vivian crossed the alley and with a beautiful drift, she stopped the car in front of a wooden door with a stone lion. It was a very large courtyard house. It was built with ancient green bricks and dark sandalwood for the door. This kind of family was either rich or noble. To be able to live in such a big house in a place like the capital, not only did they have money but they also had power. Therefore, Helene Vivian suspected that the person who invited them this time was very likely to be related to the military or officials. However, the current situation was a little strange. Because outside the door, other than Helene Vivian and Beligaju, there seemed to be other people who were here for business. One of them was wearing a monk's robe. He did not have a beard and looked to be in his 40s. He had a string of prayer beads in his hand, and a group of people who looked like bodyguards followed behind him. Those who did not know better would think that they were here to fight. The other was a girl from Taipei. She looked very sweet, but she was wearing a black gauze dress and a black rose in her hair. She was in her 20s and was holding a crystal ball in her hand. It was said that she had the blood of a witch and could communicate with spirits. She had been on many variety shows and was very famous. Especially recently, she started a live broadcast on the internet. She only received one guest every week and told the fortune of that guest. Now she had become the most popular person in this circle. Those who believed in superstition and those who did not would watch her live broadcast on Tuesday night every week on time. There were 2 other people. One was a teenager who looked like he had just graduated from high school. There was no trace of emotion on his jade-like face. The other was a man in his 30s. He was calculating something with his fingers, looking very experienced. Chapter 1073. Hearing the sound of the BMW Tomahawk, everyone turned to look at Helene Vivian. The mysterious man put down his hand that was still calculating and curled his lips. Here comes another one. It turned out that everyone here had received the black invitation. Who on earth didn't even show up after calling us here? The man was obviously a little unhappy. He looked at the wooden door. This house is weird too. The rest of the people didn't say anything. Obviously, these people had met in the yin-yang circle and no one was willing to give in to the other. Except for Helene Vivian. The man glanced at them again. Miss, where are you from? Why haven't I seen you before? Self-taught. Helene Weiwei chuckled and replied to him. Then she took a step forward. She had a basic understanding of the situation in front of her. Someone had led them to this courtyard house and asked them to meet first. This was to let them know that this business deal was still uncertain who would be handed over to them. When the man heard Hellion Vivian's words, he laughed without hiding it. Then you have to be careful. Don't cry when you meet a ghost. I won't cry. Hellion Vivian turned her head and smiled. I'm afraid that you'll be the one crying when the time comes. You. The man didn't expect Hellion Vivian to be so eloquent. He was looking for a soft persimmon to bully. He knew the rest of the people and each of them was more famous than him. It wasn't easy for a small figure to come, but she didn't know how to appreciate his kindness. Hellion Vivian couldn't see through his thoughts. She casually curved her thin lips. That kind of attitude was very infuriating. The man gritted his teeth and looked at her. He sneered. Juniors nowadays are becoming more and more disrespectful. They don't have much ability but they have a lot of big words. Master Zhang. The girl interrupted the man. Her eyes were like amber. What we need to do now is to find out who called us here, not to fight among ourselves. Master Zhang's attitude changed and he laughed. Miss Leah is still the sensible one. But this door can't be pushed open. How are we going to enter? The girl held the crystal ball in her hand and frowned slightly. She also fell into deep thought. Hellion Vivian was never one to waste time by waiting. She glanced at Beligaju and strode towards the dark sandalwood door. This person is not only impolite, but also can't understand what others are saying. Master Zhang snorted. Hellion Vivian didn't have time to talk to him. She was always too lazy to be distracted when she was working. After she finished her work, she would tell Master Zhang how polite she was. He used a lot of strength in his hand but the wooden door didn't move at all. Master Zhang looked at Hellion Vivian from behind and laughed disdainfully. The wooden door did not open but there was a recording. Everyone, welcome to the 8th pawn shop. If you want to pawn something, please come inside. The monk also frowned. What the hell? This recording again. In other words, before she came, everyone would have such a recording when they pushed open the door. Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows and looked at the wooden door in front of her again. Since it couldn't be pushed open, it must be controlled by something else. Was it a mechanism? Hellion Vivian reached out and touched the wooden door. Master Zhang found a shady place to stay because it was too hot. From time to time he would say a few words to the witch named Leah. After seeing Hellion Vivian's action, he twitched the corner of his mouth again. Here comes a crazy one. How worrying. Hellion Vivian didn't hear this sentence. Beligaju heard it. He looked back and slowly raised his hand with a black glove. With a faint smile, he made a shooting gesture in the direction of Master Zhang. Ha! The low laughter was the voice of a demon when he met the most disgusted human. However, Master Zhang didn't know. He just opened his mouth and said angrily, "Where did these two people come from? So arrogant." Amitba. The monk raised one hand. Don't argue with the juniors. I guess they don't have much ability. They just want to get a share. Master Zhang sneered. When something happens later, I want to see how they can act cool. Standing at the door and touching it. Is there something wrong with their brains? Forget it. Did you write the contact information on the letter? The monk lowered his eyes. It's more important to find out who called you and me first. Master Zhang and the monk usually didn't see eye to eye, but that was when they were competing. But now it was different. There were outsiders. They couldn't give such a lucrative business to the others. Other than this sentence, there's nothing else in the letter. The key is that the door isn't open. Is there anyone inside or not? Just as Master Zhang was complaining, Hellion Vivian locked her gaze on the string of red lanterns hanging on the wooden door. The lanterns looked like decorations but there was no wick. Instead there was a string hanging on one side. Hellion Vivian narrowed her eyes and pulled down the string. Master Zhang and the monk paused when they heard the sound. They looked at the wooden door that slowly opened in front of them, not knowing what had happened. Hellion Vivian tugged on the string and exerted force again. The wooden door opened completely. What appeared in front of everyone was a courtyard pawnshop with the characteristics of the Republic of China. Many Chinese roses were blooming inside. Everything was old-fashioned and the path was paved with green bricks. Probably because it hadn't been inhabited for a long time, there was no sign of sunlight shining on it. It gave off a gloomy feeling. It was obvious that the wooden door could be opened because Hellion Vivian had found the correct method. The youth was the first to walk towards Hellion Vivian. He didn't say much, only 2 words. Smart. Master Zhang didn't think much of it. Wasn't it just a string? If they had seen it, they could have opened the door too. The few of them walked into the courtyard. The group of bodyguards led by the monk didn't follow them in. This was because the moment the monk stepped in, the wooden door behind them slammed shut. Master Zhang and the monk immediately turned around and pushed with both hands, but the wooden door didn't respond. How strange. He cursed heavily and turned back to look at the courtyard that had a strong Chinese flavor. He frowned. Unlike him, Wei Wei was very clear that this kind of mechanism had a time effect. Once the time was up, the wooden door would close once again. Unless they pulled the rope from the outside again, otherwise they simply wouldn't be able to get out. Chapter 1074. In fact, the courtyard they were in was not big because it was a house within a house. Only by opening this house could they walk inside. Facing them was a room with the word pawn shop written on it. There was no one in the room, but as soon as they walked in, there would be voices again. I know what you want to pawn. Your contracts have been prepared and placed on the table. Please sign the contract and come to the counter to exchange. You will know everything you want to know. Hellion Vivian looked at the copper coins scattered on the wooden table. There was indeed a contract drawn on the table, but the thing pawned on the contract was their lives. Hellion Vivian, Jing Zifeng, Wu Fan, Leah, and Zhang Qichao. Except for a certain highness, everyone's name was written on the contract without any difference. The blood stains seemed to indicate that they were about to lose their lives here. Master Zhang's face turned green. Who on earth is making such a boring joke? From the moment I received this registered letter, I felt that something was wrong. The monk looked around. The Yin energy in this room is too strong. It's not good for anyone to stay here any longer. Why don't we think of a way to get out as soon as possible? It won't be so simple when it gets dark. Master Zhang immediately echoed, Master Wu Fan is right. There's something strange about this room. I can't sense any resentment, but it's very gloomy. It's better to leave as soon as possible. Did you forget that the door to enter is blocked? Jing Zifeng's tone did not match his age at all. It was cold. Master Zhang did not dare to provoke this young man. After all, he was the only one who saw him get out of the military vehicle. However, it was very strange. They all came on their own. Why was this young man sent here by a military vehicle? Master Zhang was full of questions, but he did not say anything. Leah, who was holding the crystal ball, closed her eyes. Her beautiful eyebrows furrowed as if she was in pain. Then she opened her eyes and said weakly, My sixth sense tells me that we have to sign this contract to have a chance. Miss Leah, you are really too amazing. Zhang Tianshi looked at her as if he was admiring her. Hellion Vivian chuckled but did not say anything. Sixth sense? The recording had clearly told them that they had to sign a contract to know everything they knew. Was there a need to use his sixth sense? However, as long as it didn't affect her, Hellion Vivian wouldn't do anything that would ruin her reputation. Moreover, in the current situation, the person who sent the registered letter had aroused her curiosity to a great extent. She really wanted to know what had happened to make the person who sent the letter test them like this. But how do we sign the contract? Zhang Tianshi seemed to believe in the words of the witch, Leah. His belief was mixed with a bit of a man's affection for a woman. After all, Leah's appearance was the favorite of most 30-year-old otakus. Most importantly, she was very fragile, making people want to protect her. Leah shook her head. I just used too much spiritual energy. I need to take a good rest. Maybe I can find a way. However, there was only one room with a counter on the other side. There was also no way to open the small door of the counter. Hellion Vivian tried it and then raised her eyes to look at the contract drawn on the wooden table. If she followed this train of thought, then as long as she found a way to sign the contract, the wooden door would automatically open. Hellion Vivian walked to the wooden table again. Her eyes swept across the red mud at the side. She pressed her thumb on it and dipped it in red. Then she pressed on the place where the contract was to be signed. There was a bang. The small door of the counter opened. Someone walked out from inside. He was wearing a military uniform with 1 bar and 2 stars. His rank was not low. Behind him were two soldiers. Masters, everything just now was just a small game. Please don't be angry. That person said. The invitation was sent to everyone by Old Master Song. Miss Leah, Master Zhang and Master Wufan have met Old Master Song once. Old Master Song is highly respected and old. It's really inconvenient for him to come here, so I'll receive everyone. Everyone seemed to be listening to this person. Only His Highness, who really couldn't bear to see his pet dirty at all, was holding a white handkerchief and wiping the red mark on Hellion Vivian's hand with his eyes lowered. When that person saw this scene, he seemed to be stunned for a moment, but in the next second he returned to normal. The car outside is ready. There will be special people guarding your transportation. The old master wants to meet you. The meaning was very simple. The meeting place was not here. Just as Hellion Vivian thought someone was testing them. However, it was understandable. After all, it was the military. The military had always done things like this. They did not leak any information. There was truth in what was false and there was truth in what was true. There were 3 military Hummers parked outside the courtyard. They all had very hard license plates. The soldiers guarding the cars walked over and saluted that person. Each of them was wearing a straight military uniform. There were women's and men's uniforms. It wasn't like the camouflage uniforms seen on TV or in the army. Instead, it was the formal uniform worn by soldiers in a square formation. The aura of the Republic of China was very strong. These clothes need the masters to change into them, that person said politely. Sorry to trouble you. Anyone who was in the 2 professions of feng shui and yin and yang knew that in this world, the people who burned incense and worshipped Buddha the most were the officials, followed by those rich businessmen of all sizes. In today's society, it was no longer allowed to believe in these gods and Buddhas, so no official was willing to let others know that they believed in these things. Not to mention General Yuan Sun like Old Master Song. However, Master Zhang and the others couldn't understand. In the past, when Old Master Song saw them, they could tell that he didn't believe in them, let alone believe in ghosts in the world. Why was it different this time? He even asked them to wear military uniforms before meeting. It seemed that something had really happened and he didn't want others to know. In less than a few minutes, everyone had changed their clothes. The moment Hellion Vivian came out, she saw a certain highness standing not far away. He was dressed in a military uniform and was dazzling. The sun shone on the military badge on his shoulder, emitting a faint glow. Black gloves were still wrapped around his slender fingers. The double-breasted coat was luxurious and perfect. He was looking at her. Chapter 1075. Oh, I got it on when I was changing. Hellion Vivian also touched her face. Her hands itched to take a photo of His Highness, but after thinking about it carefully, she felt that it was better to be alone with His Highness like this, so she reached out and put her phone away. Beligaju had long noticed her actions and his eyes darkened. There were some things that he seemed to have forgotten to do to her last night. But it didn't matter. He could make it up to her tomorrow night. Thinking of this, the corners of the man's mouth curled up into a smile. Hellion Vivian felt that the smile was a little naughty. Just as she was about to ask His Highness what he was smiling about, the few people over there came out. Jing Zifeng was undoubtedly the most outstanding person besides His Highness. That military uniform seemed to be tailor-made for him, and every inch of it was very fitting. As for the others, Wu Fan was a monk. It was not obvious when he was wearing a monk's robe, but when he was wearing a military uniform his beer belly could be seen. Master Zhang's figure was not bad, but his temperament was a little pretentious. Even when he wore a military uniform he looked a little like a traitor. After the few of them changed they got into the car. They were blindfolded and the man apologized to them again. Hellion Vivian did not object. Wearing the blindfold was just enough for her to sleep in the car. Beligaju could also see that she was sleepy. The 2 of them sat in the back and he directly let Hellion Vivian lie down and use his legs as a pillow. His Highness was also wearing a blindfold, but this did not affect his ability to distinguish the dangers around him. His fingers casually stroked Hellion Vivian's hair. His side profile was so handsome that the driver couldn't help but look through the rearview mirror. Hellion Vivian only felt very comfortable. Like a cat, she nestled in Beligaju's arms. After the man noticed the movements of the person in his arms, the lines of his thin lips became much gentler. He bent down and kissed the top of her head. The quality of the military brothers was good. Otherwise, they would have gone berserk when they were shown such affection. The driver only coughed softly. Beligaju raised his eyebrows disapprovingly. He would still pamper her. The soldier felt like he had been attacked 10,000 times. He bit his lip and whispered to the person next to him, "Captain, when do you think I can find a girlfriend?" The captain thought to himself, "You ask me, but who should I ask? My girlfriend is still missing." However, he still couldn't show it on the surface. He only said 4 words in a very dignified manner: "Drive carefully." The scenery outside gradually darkened. The weather in June changed quickly. At first it was just a little windy. When the car stopped, it was already raining heavily. Thunder continued to rumble in the sky, rumbling in their ears. That sound always gave people goosebumps. Celestial Master Zhang was the first to be let out of the car. As soon as he walked down, he was splashed all over by the water on the ground. Someone held an umbrella for him, but the rain was too heavy. The sound of the rain hitting the umbrella made people feel even more uncomfortable. Why did it start to rain? Moreover, did they take too long to leave? They had been driving for more than 2 hours. They were probably out of the capital and in Hebei. Celestial Master Zhang was also a scheming person. Although he looked like he was counting the road along the way. "All right, everyone, you can take off your blindfolds now." The captain's voice sounded again, but this time, it sounded muffled through the sound of the rain. Hellion Vivian's blindfold was taken off by Beligaju. As soon as she opened her eyes, she saw a flash in the sky and landed in the forest not far away. In an instant, countless black crows flew over her head, squeaking as if they were indicating something. There was a rule in the yin and yang world that it was not appropriate to use magic to catch ghosts during a thunderstorm. This sentence was not groundless. Anything that was unclean would become particularly ferocious on a rainy day. In addition, the black crows flying in the sky and the military villa built in the suburbs were not a good sign. Celestial Master Zhang's expression changed. "Why does this look like a sign of a zombie coming back to life?" As if in response to Celestial Master Zhang's words, another bolt of lightning flashed in the sky. Following that, there was a heart-wrenching scream. There was a panting in the scream. No one needed to guess. Everyone knew that it came from the villa. What was that just now? Leah immediately turned around and asked the captain who had brought them here. The captain's voice was very calm. "You'll know when you enter and see the old master." Celestial Master Zhang did not dare to enter, but with so many colleagues around he could not run away. Moreover, he could offend anyone but Department Head Song. No matter how afraid he was, he could only brace himself and enter. The others all had their own thoughts as well. After all, that scream was too terrifying. It sounded especially scary on a rainy day. Fortunately, the villa was brightly lit. These lights seemed to dispel a lot of the yin energy. The interior decoration was very gentle and grand. In the middle of the hall, there was a large saber hanging horizontally. As for the other places, there were yellow talismans everywhere. There was also a wind chime hanging at the door. The first thing Hellion Vivian saw was the wind chime. Whose idea was it to hang the wind chime here? Didn't they know that the wind chime gathered yin and attracted ghosts? "Department head, we've brought them here." Hearing this, the old man who had been sitting on the sofa turned his head. He was indeed old. Even his eyebrows were white and there were age spots on his hands. However, this did not affect the military temperament that he had accumulated over the years. Especially when he looked at people, his eyes were very oppressive. "Take a seat. It's been hard on the masters to come in the rain." The old man smiled with the dragon-headed walking stick in his hand. He had the demeanor of a general. However, he had been in a high position for a long time. Even though his upbringing was very good, his words sounded like an order. Celestial Master Zhang knew how to flatter people. He immediately said, "It's not hard, it's not hard. Department Head Song, if there's anything you can just tell us." When I received the registered letter, I was still a little puzzled. I thought it was a prank. The registered letter was written by my granddaughter. I didn't know about it at first. The old man's voice sank. Many days ago she started saying that the house was haunted. I didn't believe her. Chapter 1076. Master Zhang's mouth opened wide as if he had not expected such a reason at all. Furthermore, one after another had died. Master Zhang and the monk looked at each other. Their hearts trembled, but they did not show it on their faces. Anyway, there were so many people. Nothing should happen. When Master Zhang thought of this, his expression changed. He said confidently, "Department Head Song, don't worry. Everything will be better after tonight. I know that all of you are the best in the industry." The old man smiled as if he believed Celestial Master Zhang's words. However, he added, "I've also heard of the people who came before me. Some of them didn't know anything and wanted to fool people. Some of them were really talented, but they still couldn't escape the next day." When the old man pointed out this, everyone basically understood that Department Head Song did not completely trust their abilities. "I survived with a gun on my shoulder. I don't believe in ghosts in this world." The old man let out a long sigh and continued, "But my granddaughter is different. I usually don't care much about her. Her parents have passed away a long time ago and I often don't come back. I live in the army all year round. All these years this girl has been living alone. Now that something like this has happened, I hope that everyone can really help her." This time Master Zhang did not dare to act rashly. He only nodded obediently. The old man turned his head and said to Leah, "My granddaughter trusts Miss Leah the most. He often watches your show. She said that if we can invite you, perhaps things will turn around." "Department Head Song, you're too polite." Leah was much more unfathomable than Master Zhang. She held the crystal ball in her hand as if she could really calculate something. The old man nodded and said, "Do you have any other questions?" Master Zhang and the monk were drinking tea. Leah just sat there. She was wearing a mysterious black gauze dress and did not speak. She looked very much like a witch. There was a brief silence in the hall. The old man's gaze swept past them. Hellion Vivian saw that no one spoke, so she put down the teacup in her hand. There was a smile in her voice. "Department Head Song hasn't said yet. How is the deal? How will the commission be paid?" It was not just the others. Even the captain paused for a moment. How dare someone ask Department Head Song such a question? After all, he was from the military, so he reacted quickly. The old man reached out his hand and stopped the uniformed captain from speaking. He smiled and said, "I won't shortchange you guys. However, it depends on whether you guys are capable or not. If it's just those people on TV, I'll just ask them to leave. It's a good idea to distribute the commission according to ability." Hellion Weiwei crossed her slender legs and smiled. "I still have a few questions that I want to ask Department Head Song." The old man raised his hand. "Please speak." "Department Head Song said that you weren't the one who wrote the registered letter. Then weren't you the one who asked us to play in a secret room first to test our abilities?" Hellion Vivian's voice was very indifferent. The old man paused for a moment. "Yes, that's my granddaughter's idea. She doesn't want to see a scammer come and never return. I also agree with her idea. At the very least, I can see everyone's courage in the courtyard house. Some nominal masters have not even started yet, but they are already so scared that they want to escape. Such people come, they will only lose their lives." Master Zhang listened at the side and lowered his head guiltily to take a sip of tea. Hellion Vivian thought to herself that Department Head Song was indeed smart. Every word he said could achieve the effect of implying something. Hellion Vivian had always been straightforward with smart people. She directly asked the second question. "Since you said that you don't believe in ghosts, shouldn't your first reaction be to find a doctor to diagnose her after such a thing happened? Is there anything wrong with her mental state? Why did you allow her to write these invitations instead?" The old man did not speak, as if he was thinking about something. Hellion Vivian narrowed her eyes. "Or did something happen before that made you think that she was indeed followed by a ghost?" The old man did not expect her to ask such a question in just a few words. He looked up and suddenly smiled. "Miss, you're really not simple." At this moment the captain whispered something in the old man's ear. The old man raised his eyebrows and looked at Hellion Vivian again. "You solved all the questions in the courtyard house?" "Yes." Hellion Vivian did not think that it was difficult. It was just that she needed some observation skills and imagination. She was originally from the Tang sect. If she could not even guess these things, wouldn't she have wasted her time? The old man was silent for a while before he spoke again. He said to Hellion Vivian, before this, something did happen. Last year Tong Tong went out with several of her classmates. One of them had an accident. At night the tide rose. No one knew why she went to the beach at that time, but she was drowned just like that. Later, a doctor gave several students psychological counseling. I thought this matter should be over, but I didn't expect that after half a year, that is, a few days ago, Tong Tong kept saying that something seemed to be following her. Not only Tong Tong but also the guests who came to live at that time said that they heard someone crying and saw a figure by the window. They were so scared that they took a plane the next day. I didn't tell anyone about this, but now I can only say what I need to say. The 4 friends who were with Tong Tong that year were also here. They were worried and wanted to come and see. They all lived on the 2nd floor. I hope you can catch this ghost tonight. Hellion Vivian did not speak. Master Zhang did not forget to speak. He immediately said, "We will do our best to protect Miss Song." Very good. In the remaining time you can discuss how to deal with tonight. I'll go up and see Tong Tong. As the old man spoke, he stood up and walked to the 2nd floor with the help of his dragon-headed cane. The captain who followed him was left behind. That person glanced at the clock hanging on the wall and said with a faint smile, "Miss Song is still very weak, so she can't come down to see you. There's still some time before dark. According to the previous arrangement, I should have taken you to see the surrounding terrain of the villa and go swimming in the swimming pool at the back. Unfortunately, it's raining today, so we can only wait until dawn tomorrow to take you to relax. The servants have prepared tea and snacks. You don't have to be polite. Just ask them to prepare whatever you want to eat." I still have to drive to the city later. I'll be back before dark. If there's anything you need, I can help you buy it. You're tuning in to the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.